I said, let's let the case be adjudicated and we'll see how it goes. And obviously no other president would be prosecuted for this.
Do you hear that? That's the sliminess seeping off. Come on. Let's watch this Biden v. Trump debate at DebateCon. Let's watch it. It'll be the last thing we do today.
If you think that Biden would be better for America's future, please put your hand up. Ryan's just doing a quick count right now. And then it's just going to be a percentage change. So at the end of the debate, we'll do the same poll and we'll see if the same percentage of people would say Biden rather than Trump. So next we'll need, if you think that Trump would be better for America's future, would you slide your hand? Wow. You got it. Thanks so much. And I want to give a quick word from Steven, who's representing Manifold. Steven, seriously, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I want to give you a chance just to share a little bit more about Manifold. Thanks again.
Thank you for putting on this wonderful event.
Okay, let's skip. So they're gonna have a thing, it's like an app in the background where people can vote for who's winning the debate.
3 reasons. Let's say your top 3 reasons.
Sure, we'll go do a few. What do I have, 30 minutes for this, or how long? Because Jesus. First of all, I would like to honor my debate partner, Sean, who has the unenviable position of defending the undefendable Donald Trump. So I guess I'll focus on one area, although I imagine our talks will take us across a lot of different areas. When we're looking for who would be a better president.
Okay, if somebody was to ask me, what were the top 3 reasons why I'd vote for Joe Biden? God, that's a difficult one. No, well, God, number 1 would be just foreign policy and national security. And I know that seems like a strange thing to say, but considering Trump's record of like Biden's response to Israel-Palestine, in my opinion, has been terrible. It's been somewhat better in the last few days with statements from John Kirby suggesting that a long-term occupation of Gaza is not something that they would support. But like on the large scale, I've not been very happy with how the Biden administration has responded and has refused to really apply much direct pressure to the Israeli government. It's more kind of like nudge, nudge, suggest, while we're also sending them $14.5 billion in military aid whenever that package gets through, either bundled with the Ukrainian aid or separately, as I know Mike Lee and Matt Gaetz and others want. Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. But when you listen to Donald Trump talk about it, his response is, they take some of our blood, we take buckets of theirs. If Benjamin Netanyahu was to say, we are going to annex Gaza, I do not think Donald Trump would stop him. Now, Donald Trump doesn't like Benjamin Netanyahu. That's the one positive thing about Trump when it comes to this issue. But whatever leader is in charge of Israel during the next period in 2024 will be in the post-Gaza-Israel war scenario. They will be the ones working with the Israelis on managing a possible occupation, a possible pullout of Israeli troops, etc. And I do not trust Trump for that. I don't trust Trump to respond reasonably or respond cogently to airstrikes on American bases in Syria and throughout the Middle East. I don't trust him on North Korea and South Korea, considering he at one point was saying, Rocket Man, fire and fury, heating up the rhetoric with the North Koreans before then starting engagement, then crashing the engagement into the wall, and then having the North Koreans blow up the South Korean liaison office on national TV. I don't think he has a consistent foreign policy belief. I think that's why he flip-flopped on things like Syria again and again and again. We're going to pull out. Never mind, we're not going to pull out. The Kurds weren't with us at D-Day, so we're going to pull out. Never mind, we're going to stay. Never mind, we're going to pull out again. And just a flip-flop, cost people lives that was completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary, because Erdogan rolled his pockets. I don't trust him when it comes to airstrikes and conducting them within restrictions, within good restrictions to consider civilian casualties, considering this is the same guy who said you need to target the families of terrorists. And I think that type of mentality is only going to create more enemies on the world stage, not less. I don't trust him on Ukraine, which should probably be obvious. But that's not the only reason. I also trust Joe Biden more when it comes to dealing with issues like poverty. I think the child tax credit, which gave a $500 tax credit to working class Americans who are raising kids, helped cut child poverty in half. And I think that's something we should build upon, not something that we should undermine, which is what the Republican Party did, because they were the party that stopped the child tax credit from being renewed in its $500 a month program, which was, again, cutting child poverty in half. And I think those types of programs, like the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act, has been very, very good for helping the American economy, and is why the United States, when you look at our GDP growth and control for inflation, we have the highest GDP growth of all post-COVID G7 countries. So I would say economically, there's a reason why I'd vote for Joe Biden. And I would also say, and this is a major reason, and I think this reason probably, if it does, probably almost trumps, if not trumps, my foreign policy reason. I believe Joe Biden respects the peaceful transfer of power, and I don't believe Trump does. Trump, when he lost the election, even before he lost the election, he said it was rigged if he lost. Then he lost. What do you imagine? He said it was rigged, but that wasn't a new development. He was saying stuff like that during the Republican primary. He was saying stuff like that going into the 2016 election. And he was certainly saying stuff like that going into the 2020 election. So it wasn't like this was a secret. I mean, his view of like, if I lose, it's rigged has been semi well known for quite a while now. The only difference is in 2020, he actually tried to act on it. He tried to create false slates of electors. His team around him were illegally accessing voting machines, the same thing he was accusing his opponents of doing. They were writing up executive orders to seize voting machines with the military. They were trying to find a way to send the vote back to the states, to the Republican-controlled state houses across the country, to try to keep Donald Trump in office. He spread tons and tons of baseless conspiracy theories about how the election was stolen, and once he couldn't prove it in a court of law, he did not accept it. He kept going and kept going and kept going. Challenging the results of the election or asking for every vote to be counted is not new. Al Gore did it, and other presidents did it. Hillary Clinton suggested to do it. But using every avenue to check if there was a problem with widespread voter fraud, to challenge the results of the election, failing on every level, and then trying to do it anyway around the system to undermine the system, that's different. I don't believe Donald Trump respects the peaceful transfer of power. And he's willing to do, I think, anything within, not even within reason, anything that keeps him out of the firing line, aka out of a prison cell, to either get back in power or stay in power. And at the time, it was stay in power. He even went as far as to say that the Constitution should be suspended because of how the election went. If Joe Biden was to say such a thing, Republicans would treat it as disqualifying. Donald Trump says it, it's not disqualifying. So I would say my three main things would be foreign policy, the economy, and respect for the peaceful transfer of power, respect for our democracy. Those would be the three main things. Those aren't the only things, but those are my three main things.
For the next term, I think something that's important is to look for what are the things that the president can actually affect, and what are the records of both of these presidents so far on the things they can claim to affect. One of the areas that I'm going to fixate heavily on, because this is an area where the president can take point, is going to be, of course, foreign policy. Trump's foreign policy in almost every single regard was an unmitigated disaster. The photo opportunities that he had with North Korea, the lack of concessions that he gave from them, the discomfort of our allies in the region as a result from that, exiting us from the Iranian nuclear treaty that we are no longer allowed to re-enter, that we don't have any control over anymore, as Iran races towards nuclear weapons, that we have completely lost all oversight on. The obscuring of the number of drone strikes that we're doing, as Trump has sought under his administration to make it harder to see.
That is true. Not only did Trump drastically increase drone strikes during his administration, and that's in comparison to Obama, by the way, during the troop surge. Not only did he drastically increase drone strikes during his administration, while people tried to portray him as the peacemaker, he also did it while also restricting more information on said drone strikes from the press. So he increased the drone strikes and made it harder to find out about them.
How many drone strikes were actually happening, and the fact that these drone strikes were still probably increasing or remaining the same under his administration, though it's hard to tell. The abandoning of allied forces in northern Syria, the Kurdish people that we were working with to fight ISIS, that he basically abandoned to Turkish attack.
His justification was wild. It was like, he led the finishing of Operation Inherent Resolve, he took the battle over from Obama, finished it with the Kurds, and then immediately was like, the Kurds weren't with us on D-Day, as a justification as to pulling out. There was no good justification for him to pull out that he put forward. And the only explanation I could really wrap my head around was that Erdogan called him in the middle of the night, talked about how you guys recognize the PKK as a terror group. We recognize PKK as a terror group. They're in Syria. Just let us go in a little bit. We'll bust them up a bit. Everything will be chill. And without talking to his advisors, he probably was like, okay, and then tweeted it out on Twitter. With like one staffer writing something up quick. Because the next day, what would you know it? He flip-flopped off of that position because he probably talked to other people in the administration. He was like, this is a terrible idea. We're betraying our ally, et cetera, after he tried to do the press run. And then he would keep flip-flopping on it. I think he flip-flopped on it like 3 or 4 times by the end of it.
The lack of any real agreement made with the Taliban, the fact that when he did those round of talks with the Taliban, the Afghanistani army was not present, the Afghanistan army was not present, the idea that he kicked the can on the road, or he kicked the can down the road on those talks until the next administration so he wouldn't have to deal with it, the fact that he says that he would be the one to solve the Ukrainian issue despite the fact that he did literally nothing about Russian occupation in Crimea, the fact that he was constantly antagonistic towards both of our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, and our neighbors afar. Angela Merkel famously saying that Europe can no longer look to the United States for leadership around the world. The fact that Trump undermined NATO, questioned why we were even in it, made it sound like the most important part was just individual countries contributing some military budget to it. The fact that the parts of his foreign policy that were supposed to affect us economically sucked. The tariff agreements with China were a disaster. Everybody agrees at this point that it amounted to, I think it was like a $72 billion tax that Americans ended up paying, and it didn't even target China in the way that we wanted it to, as opposed to, say, the CHIPS Act that Biden did that actually centered a lot of new semiconductor manufacturing at home. I'll do a foreign policy there, and then I'm sure we'll talk about other things like crime, domestic policy, and everything later, but I'll turn it over to Sean, see where he wants to go from there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you want to focus on what the president can actually impact, because as of right now, with split government and likely we're not going to have a president, at least for the full term, with both chambers of Congress. It really is down to what the president can impact. Now, it's interesting that you would lead with foreign policy, because one president that we're talking about actually had a guy that had to be stripped of security clearances due to the fact that he was loyal to Iran, which was uncovered in emails in a recent scandal. This, of course, is Rob Malley, and Rob Malley was only
Robert Malley, he was the person who created the, well, I didn't think created the Iran deal, but he was largely influential in designing the Iran deal.
The head of our side of the negotiations for Iran. And it turns out he was recruited by the Iranians years ago and was advocating for them. So in that particular point, I'd rather have somebody rip up a deal than put in an agent for the other side as the person to negotiate a new deal. As far as what the president can impact, one of the big things.
Well, here's the difference, is if Donald Trump wasn't president, we would have the deal and we would have kept the deal and we wouldn't have to have scrapped the deal because the deal was largely fine. And it largely included just like unfreezing their own money. So I think in the grand scheme of things, stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon in return for unfreezing their own money, I think is a pretty good deal, as long as we can make sure that they, don't develop a nuclear weapon and the UN inspections continue and the facilities are properly maintained.
That they can affect in our day-to-day lives is through the regulatory state.
Tuna Chip, thanks for the 8 viewers. I appreciate it.
Now, Trump was actually the first real deregulator in American history. With just 20 regulations that he removed while he was president, just 20, the average American is estimated to have saved, in terms of income, $3,100. That's $3,100 in your pocket due to the fact that the Trump administration was using his executive power to pare down the regulatory state. This amounted to $220 billion in cost savings for consumers and for businesses. By contrast, our buddy Joe Biden has added $360 billion in new regulations, big ticket regulations, and compliance for this. Just the paperwork is 220 million hours. If you think that that is not impacting you economically, you got another thing coming. And speaking of economic impact, many of our major cities in this country have to deal with a migration crisis. Now, one of these candidates, even though the wall didn't get built, let's be honest, campaigned on building a wall. The other candidate campaigned on having asylum seekers rush to the border. Now, here's the problem. I'm in favor of...
What do you mean having asylum seekers rush to the border? I don't know what that means. I think he means that Biden was open about the fact that America will welcome asylum seekers. I think that's what he means.
Asylum, everybody should be in favor of asylum if people are in danger and all of that. We want to help people because we're kind and compassionate people. But the thing is, when you have migrants that know for a fact, and they're economic migrants, make no mistake about it, that they can go to a border agent, say the right words, and then be put into our asylum court system, that creates a giant backlog. It actually hurts our ability.
Hey, did somebody just raid again? Damn, female. Thank you for the raid of 8. I appreciate it.
To help those who are legitimately seeking asylum, and this was encouraged by the Biden administration. By contrast, probably the best policy of any president related to immigration in the last 20 years, President Trump instituted a policy called Remain in Mexico. Now, the idea behind this was pretty straightforward. If you're saying I'm fleeing, let's say, Venezuela, due to the fact that I feel like I'm being persecuted or whatever, well, the route to from Venezuela to the United States goes through about 8 different countries. Now, if you're afraid you're going to be killed or persecuted or whatever the reasons for asylum, there is no reason why you shouldn't stop and apply for asylum in each and every one of these policies. Even though it's called Remain in Mexico, it just means apply for asylum in each country and then come to the United States after you're rejected, because again, asylum is supposed to be about safety, not economic opportunity. Of course, the Biden administration did not continue that policy.
1 second. I was gonna raid Tuna, but I checked and he was raiding to Dylan, so I copied his raid. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
He encouraged people to flood to the border, and now we have about 7 million border crossings, according to the CBD data. A bunch of Republicans will tell you 8 million. You pick whichever number you want. It's not good, and we're suffering the consequences for that. Major cities in this country are having to pay to hotel these people, and what's Biden's response? He wants to fast-track work permits, give these people a faster magnet to further draw them into the United States of America and prolong the crisis. I think the number one thing that a president needs to do is advocate for the citizens of this country. These people are by definition not that, and this is just one of the many reasons why Trump is a better candidate than Joe Biden. Also, Trump is alive. Joe Biden, we don't know. I've seen Weekend at Bernie's. I know you guys have seen it. And, you know...
Dude, we're seeing Trump do the same type of slip-ups. We've seen it recently at events, too. This is the thing. We don't know Trump and or Biden's, like, mental state. We don't know. We don't have the medical documents or anything. But, I mean, I'll be honest about it. It'd be really funny if both Trump and Biden going into 2024 have a debate and it's just, what? Huh? Who? Where am I? I mean, it would be terrible for America's image, but it'd be a really, really, really funny interaction.
Symbolically, Destiny's drinking Red Bull to build up the energy to talk about Joe Biden, while I have water because I don't need any hype.
All right, we're gonna kick it into an open discussion. So I'd like to put it over to the other side to respond to some of what you just heard and get us into it.
Yeah, I guess the most important determining factor for, Trump's future health is, how effective the U.S. healthcare system operates in federal prisons. I'm not entirely sure what that looks like, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. I'm going to be honest, I haven't even heard of the Rob Malley story with Iran. That might be one, particular person. Is this a person that was appointed directly by Biden?
Yes, he was the person negotiating the new nuclear deal on behalf of America, even though he works for Iran. And by the way, there's other people that also have Iranian ties in that group.
Sure, maybe Iranian ties. Do these people rise to the level of Donald Trump when he was running for election, literally choosing people like Paul Manafort, who was working as an unregistered foreign agent in Ukraine, or people like Flynn who were lying to the FBI in regards to contacts that they had with people in Russia? Does it rise to that level of making those types of personal choices? Do you think Biden is choosing those people in particular? Or?
That's true. That's true. And I'm looking here at the Robert Malley stuff. It seems to me, I'm trying to find more stuff on him being a Iranian agent. We know he's an Iranian agent. I found some publications that are accusing him of being that, but I'm not finding any publication that I'm familiar with that is saying that we know that he is an agent. We know that he has ties, and we know that he mishandled classified documents. Those are the two things we know. But either way, it's still a bad scandal.
First of all, Flynn was allowed to speak to the Russians. He was an incoming person who was going to be on national security. Manafort worked for the campaign. Should he have registered as a foreign agent? Sure, and he was prosecuted for that. But again, we're talking about the
And Robert Malley was removed for his improper handling of classified documents.
and negotiating with an enemy nation on this nuclear deal that you seem to want to praise, but he works for the Iranians.
Well, how about we talk about the merits of the nuclear deal? Robert Malley was one of the people who helped design the deal. Whether or not, and by the way, I don't know if we know for sure that he was working for the Iranians. Do we know for sure he's working for the Iranians? Does anybody have a link on that? Because everything I can find, it's not any publication that I'm familiar with. I know that he mishandled government documents, or that's at least the accusation. And we know that he has ties, but do we know he's an agent? If anybody has a link on that, I'd appreciate it. I haven't been following the story as closely as I guess I should have. I didn't know it was going to come up in this conversation.
So
And
Flynn,
it's been stripped of all security clearances.
sure. So if Flynn was allowed to negotiate with the incoming, as an incoming part of the administration, I don't know why he lied to the FBI then about his conversations. Maybe you should talk to him about that.
I mean, it
'cause
could be a
apparently he seemed to
perjury
think-
trap. Who knows?
I mean, I don't.
Could be a perjury trap. Okay. Gotcha. That's giving him a lot of generosity.
I don't think anybody made him
I don't know if we should be making those assumptions.
lie if you actually read through any of the testimony related to that. Do we think that, I'm curious, on a broad macro perspective, if we look at the approaches that the presidents have taken to foreign policy, do you think that Donald Trump was better at shoring up support for America internationally, or do you think Joe Biden has done a better job for that?
Well, there's two things. There's one, there's like, oh, are you well liked by like Angela Merkel and all these European leaders? And
Okay, here we go. I got something better on it now. Biden administration suspended Iran envoy Robert Malley, helped to fund, support, and direct an Iranian intelligence operation designed to influence the United States and allied governments, according to a 12 of purloined Iranian government emails. The emails, which were reported on by veteran Wall Street Journal correspondent Jay Solomon, Radiant Semaphore, and by Iran International, the London-based immigrant opposition outlet, which is the most widely read independent news source inside Iran. So this was written about, or this was published by Jay Solomon in an opposition. That means it's an opposition to the Iranian regime outlet. Huh. I wish we had another outlet covering it. If we had something else outside of an oppositional Iranian outlet. Were published last week after being extensively verified over a period of several months by two outlets. They show that Malley had helped to infiltrate an Iranian agent of influence named Aryan Tabidi in some of the most sensitive positions in the U.S. government. First at the State Department and now at the Pentagon, where she had been serving as Chief of Staff for the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Christopher Meyer. Got you. Okay. Yeah, that's bad.
on the flip side, you have something like the Trump administration sending more weapons to the Ukrainians than the Biden administration, and the Biden
What?
administration European leaders. And they're on the flip side, you have something like the Trump administration sending more weapons to the Ukrainians than the Biden administration, and the Biden administration not realizing that Vladimir to the way he viewed Obama.
I don't know what that cut was. I don't know what he was going to say after that, but I'll just put it bluntly. Under the Trump administration, we had the first offensive weapons sent to Ukraine. We had certain types of like weapons and material sent to Ukraine under the Obama administration, but it was things like counter battery radar. It was like, oh, we can watch the Russians bomb us. Great, but we can't bomb them back. Whereas Trump was the first one to send things like javelins, but I don't know if we can really give Trump credit for that, considering Trump held that aid hostage and was holding it hostage in order to get political information about his opponent, and it was congressionally approved. So it wasn't really that he necessarily sent it, it was that Congress sent it. And then he blocked it for a bit and tried to get political information out of it. I mean, he didn't veto it, which is good, so I guess we can give him credit for that. But again, it was Congress that ended up approving that aid and allocating that aid. So it would have been literally unconstitutional for Trump to try to stop it, which he did, and that's why he was impeached.
During the Crimea annexation as somebody who wouldn't do anything, which likely is one of the factors that played into his decision to invade Ukraine. So, like, yeah.
That is true. I agree with that.
Yeah,
but that was under the Obama administration, where There was many times during the Obama administration where Biden did not agree with where the Biden administration was going. Biden, according to Biden, and I don't know, of course, this is a biased source, Biden was not nearly as bored with exceeding the mandate in Libya. Biden, since like 2012, has been wanting to pull out of Afghanistan for a while. So there are differences between Obama and Biden on the issue of foreign policy. And I can see from Biden being in office, he's sending much more weapons than either Biden or Trump did during their terms. Obviously, the conditions are different, but we can see that he's perfectly willing to send offensive weapons to the Ukrainians to defend their country.
Trump, obviously, he talks like a goofball and all.
Whereas now, like, Trump is kind of, it's like really in the air whether Trump would continue to send aid. He's talking about ending the war in 24 hours. The assumption from him seems to be, the assumption people are making about the way he talks about the war is that he would either end aid or heavily condition aid or reduce aid. I mean, that seems to be what Russia believes, and that seems to be what implication many of his supporters are taking. But who knows? He also said in one interview that if the Russians don't accept his brilliant 24-hour deal, then he'll simply double the amount of aid we're sending to the Ukrainians. He's a wild card, and that's my problem with Trump always on foreign policy, is you really don't know what you're going to get with him. He's like a fucking Kinder Egg.
All that, but he tends to appoint people to do the policies, and because he's not particularly interested in individual policies, he's more interested in negotiating and like the whole process of being president, they tend to do a better job. Biden, on the other hand, is just not even awake.
What if they thought that Trump would do a better job at negotiating these policies? Why is it that almost every single person in his administration that talked about doing foreign policy ended up shit-talking him? I'm pretty sure Pence and the AG at the time had a lot of bad things to say about Trump in regards to North Korea, for instance. Do you think he handled North Korea appropriately?
I mean, what went wrong so much in North Korea that we're even talking about?
The fact that we validated him as a leader, we gave him photo opportunities, and we had talks with him without securing any sort of concessions.
I feel like people undersell the point that he froze training operations with the South Koreans and then got nothing in return. He gave them something and then nothing. I feel like that's a failure. Not only did he get nothing, by the end of Trump's administration, his relations with North Korea were so bad that they were blowing up the South Korean liaison office on state TV and broadcasting it into every home that had or could afford television
whatsoever, while telling the rest of the world that we were doing a good job in negotiating something with him, whatever that was.
The question is, as compared to what? So
as compared to not talking to him and continuing to, I guess, advertise on the world stage that until he's ready to come and have talks about cutting down their missiles program, cutting down their nuclear weapons program, until they're ready to have those talks, they're not going to be as validated as
but none.
The thing, I don't even agree with necessarily with Destiny here. I think that you could negotiate with the North Koreans without any of those preconditions. But the problem is if you're going to negotiate without any preconditions, then the North Koreans shouldn't have preconditions as well. And if the North Koreans do have preconditions, and you need some sort of precondition in response. Point is, though, at the end of the day, he's in the room with Kim Jong-un, starts negotiations, falls flat on his face. From every interpretation of how those negotiations and how those talks went, it failed. And many people who were directly involved will point the finger at Trump for as part of the reason why it failed. That Trump went in there, said, look, we're going to put like a McDonald's in every street corner. Your economy is going to be busting, but you just got to give us all your nukes. There was no question about, okay, we're going to, how about you give 5 over and then we'll open up this much into the economy. You hand over this and we'll do that. There was no back and forth of like, okay, what's some compromise we can find in the short term? And then if we do not continue denuclearization, then we'll reinstitute the sanctions. There was no talk like that. It was all like, it was basically an all or nothing discussion, which of course failed.
None of that worked for, I don't know, how many years since the Korean War with North Korea? Like, we're on the 3rd member of this freaking hereditary dynasty?
Sure, but I mean, now in the region, you've got Biden, who has better relations with Japan and South Korea, having talks about what to do with North Korea. When Donald Trump was in charge, we talked to Kimmy, we gave him some photos, and then we left.
I mean, the South Koreans wanted to do a joint Olympics under the Moon government when Trump was president. So, like, he was also, like, mirroring, to a certain extent, the policies of the Moon government at the time.
Okay, so then to be clear, you thought that Trump having photo opportunities and legitimizing Kim as a leader without actually securing any concessions, with them continuing to race towards a nuclear program and continuing to test
Yeah, but they
missiles.
already have a nuclear program. See,
Yeah, but now they also have they have U.S. approval for what they're doing. Essentially, now it seems like the U.S.
They don't
leader
have
is chill
actual
with it.
U.S. approval. You're talking about.
I don't know what that argument from Destiny is. They don't have to have U.S. approval in order to sit down. We did give them more legitimacy. But again, I think the training stuff is a much stronger argument, because you can point to the training and say that's a question about readiness for self-defense for the South Koreans. And if the South Koreans are going to give that up, they do expect something.
Like a perception of U.S. approval, which I don't think is granted. The idea that North Korea is an ally of the United States or anybody legitimately believes that is ridiculous. Remember, the way that this started is that Trump kept threatening Kim Jong-un over and over and over again, to the point where they wanted to ask for a meeting. Because we tried this like posturing in the same way that we did for, again, since 1950, whenever the Korean War had a ceasefire, because it never technically ended, and it didn't get us anywhere. Like, now we actually had an opportunity. We sent our best diplomat, Dennis Rodman, over there. He plays some like dope basketball, and you know, like, it is what it is.
Yeah, but I don't know why we think that we did anything when this is, I'm pretty sure, the first time a North Korean leader is at a photo op, a handshake, and Jesus Christ, a salute from our president. I don't know why we just hand wave that and say he was trying something. He didn't try anything. All he wanted was, and this is going to be a theme for all of Trump's administration, the only thing he wanted was a photo op. That was it. There was no diplomatic plan there. All we did was enrage or anger our allies in the region. And you can say that, who cares, it's just a photo op, but he's the president of the United States.
Who is enraged by that? Again, the Moon government at the time was very friendly to North Korea. He crossed the DMZ zone during the Olympics. Like, remember, they were hyping his sister
Sure,
as
I
this
understand we
girl
have the
boss
Olympics
dictator in the media.
Yeah, we have the Olympics story, but tensions at the time were not good, because shortly after our meetings with Kim, they literally go right back to testing
But that's
missiles.
what North Korea always does.
Yeah, except now they've done it after getting photos for the first time with the U.S. president.
All right, I mean, again,
Okay,
this is
that's fine.
like
you
the
think that-
most petty thing, maybe because you
I
don't
mean,
want to talk about Iranian spies in the Biden administration.
Sure, I don't even know if that claim is true, unfortunately. I've never even
I mean,
heard of it.
why did Rob Malley lose his security clearance?
Well, I don't know. Why did he lose his security clearance? What is
Because
the...
he was recruited by Iran well before he was in the Biden administration, along with other people, again, who are supposedly negotiating for our side on this nuclear deal.
So you're saying he was working as an unregistered foreign agent or a spy?
I don't know which one. We'll
if you're saying he was-
we'll
if you're
wait for
saying-
the shakeouts of potential indictments in the future. But
Well, how long ago did he lose his, how long ago did he lose his security clearance?
this is recent. Like, I think news
No, it was April. According to the leaked documents, it was April.
of this broke. If I have the date right here somewhere, I believe it was like last month or something like that.
And what was the reason why he lost the security clearance?
Because he was tied deeply to Iran. We have emails from him and contacts in the Iranian government, and the perception of those emails, at least according to the reporting, is that he is still loyal to the Iranian government.
Okay, it's interesting that he hasn't been charged with any crime. If it sounds like what you're talking,
Well,
you're
it's like
literally
it's like a
describing.
month. Like, it takes sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah,
to,
but why
like,
is any of this information public if there hasn't been a charge yet?
because we have media that like pursue stories, and sometimes
And
that
get
gets
leaks from the
published.
government about potential espionage investigations?
That happens all the time. What do you mean?
It doesn't happen all
You're
the
talking
time.
about the Trump administration.
think,
everything was
Sure.
leaked. In the
I don't have
Trump
information about that story.
administration.
I don't think any of that story is true, but I guess
All right,
we'll
if you
find
say
out.
so. I mean, either he lost his security clearance or he didn't. Like, this isn't up for
Well, you
debate.
can lose.
Well, that's the problem. Is he could have lost his security clearance for mishandling documents while also not being an agent for the Iranians.
Your security clearance for a variety of reasons. If you can lose a security clearance for not declaring that you're friends or in a relationship, for instance, with somebody from a foreign country, or you could lose a security clearance for a whole host of different reasons that don't involve actual espionage of the United States.
Well, I didn't say. First of all, you brought up espionage. I didn't say he would be charged with espionage. Again, that came out of your mouth. I just told you what happened, and it's an ongoing, developing story.
Okay. Well, I think that the ongoing developing story of somebody losing a security clearance that was involved in Iranian nuclear or some sort of Iranian negotiations, I don't think it's quite as bad as Donald Trump exiting us from the nuclear Iranian deal that was allowing us to keep tabs on their nuclear program.
I mean, that deal was crap, and we had a very similar deal with the North Koreans, since you brought them up back in the 90s under Clinton, and obviously that did not prevent them from developing a nuclear weapon.
I don't think we had a deal with the North Koreans that allowed the United Nations into their nuclear facilities to do constant inspections.
I don't know
to make sure.
I don't know the specifics of the North Korean deal, but like, these kind of deals don't tend to work. You also had Ben Rhodes.
This deal was working for Iran. It literally was working.
Yeah, it was working for Iran. That's the problem.
It was working for the whole world because we were preventing Iran from approaching approaching a nuclear weapons program.
I totally disagree.
Okay, the UN disagrees with you, but okay, that's fine.
What do they know? Also, in terms of foreign policy, I mean, look at what is going on in the Middle East right now. Like President Orangeman, you could say whatever you want about him, but he made it pretty clear that Israel is our ally after, I don't know, 20 presidents. That's an exaggeration. After 4 presidents promised that they were going to recognize that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, Trump actually did it. And then, weirdly enough, even though
I don't think that was a good thing, but whatever. Like, we gave them that for nothing. We didn't get any concession from the Israelis for recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, even though it was seen as extremely inflammatory and hurt our image in the Muslim world. If we're going to do something that hurts our image in the Muslim world, we should expect some concession when it either comes to the occupation of the West Bank or something to move towards cessation to hostilities, move something to a more stable relationship between the Israelis and the Palestinians, considering how large the stateless population of Palestinians are, how deep in poverty the Palestinians are, and how the blockade is continued to maintain. We gotta be something. We can't just like give them stuff for like boom, boom, boom. Here's all this stuff. Here's all these things you've wanted, and you don't gotta give us anything in return.
though we were told by the media for years that making peace between Israel and Palestine was the key to working out recognition and all these things with the Arab world, it turns out that not doing that, standing firm with your ally, actually made that clear that that was off the table. And then we started to see recognition deals from these nations of Israel, our ally.
I don't know why he's connecting the Jerusalem recognition to any of the relationships between, like, I don't know how normalization of ties is tied to the Jerusalem stuff. I would like to hear it. I would like to hear how it's related. He said it sent a clear message that we stand with Israel. That's a message that's been sent for a very, very long time.
During the Trump administration. And the wonder kid that everybody made fun of because he was put in charge of 25 million things, not my favorite person, Jared Kushner, actually did negotiate pretty well on behalf of our ally.
But then the deal he put forward, his Middle East peace plan, failed. The proposal to make peace with the Palestinians failed. It was a non-starter. It was a non-starter arrangement. And in order to get recognition from nation states like Morocco, we had to go back on commitments that the United States had previously made to recognize the people of Western Sahara as deserving a vote for their own independence, which the UN voted on. So we had to go back on our word with one people in order to try to get the Moroccans to agree to recognize Israel. Now we're seeing a lot of this fall apart right now. We're seeing, for example, Bahrain pull back normalization and pull back their embassy. So if we don't resolve the Israel-Palestine issue, all efforts made in favor of normalization could be undermined if we don't find some resolution to the conflict. And in order to find some resolution to the conflict, we cannot just endlessly just say to the Israelis, we have your back no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, considering they are illegally holding territory, and the vast majority of the international community recognizes that. This is at the same time when we're saying we want to stand up for the international order, stand up for the international system, stand up for international law and nation states like Ukraine, but then we compromise on it when it comes to Palestine. And that makes us look hypocritical. It undermines trust in the international system, that undermines trust in the United States, and it makes us look horribly hypocritical. That's not to say these wars are exactly the same. Obviously they're not. But I do believe that the occupation of land is illegal under international law, and our continued financing of that, it does make us look hypocritical.
So I'm pretty sure Donald Trump moving the embassy to Jerusalem has been lauded as a catastrophic decision because he did it for literally no reason other than to antagonize the Palestinians in the region, which, as we can see, hasn't moved us.
Can I ask you a question? Where is the capital of the United States of America?
D.C.
All right, and like who decides that? I'm just curious.
Sometime in the founding of our country, what do you mean? Who decides that?
The United States of America would decide where their own capital is, right?
Sure, yeah.
So like if Canada didn't recognize that our capital was D.C. and they said it was, you know, like
is Canada currently occupied territory
like
from the
Cleveland
United
or
States?
something? Like,
sure.
would it be weird if all of our allies recognize what Canada said, or should they recognize what we declare our capital as? Because Israel has declared their capital as Jerusalem. This is about recognition of your ally.
Yeah. Does Canada
and like that seems like a basic thing that you should honor.
Does Canada own any part of Washington D.C.?
I don't know. Does Palestine own anything? Is it even a country?
Okay.
What the fuck is he saying? What was that argument? There's a difference between a city which is divided between different national groups, one of which claims this capital, the other which claims the capital, and us not recognizing it because we see it as an unresolved issue and something that could inflame tensions in the region. And I mean, you know, tensions do feel a little inflamed right now. And if we're going to give the Israeli that concession, because that isn't an issue in Berlin, that isn't an issue in Washington, D.C., that isn't an issue in what's the capital of Canada, in Mapletown, that isn't an issue in any of these other places. If it was an issue and it was like, oh, part of this territory is illegally occupied and there's different national groups claiming this, then maybe the situation would be different. It's Ottawa? No, it's Mapletown.
So the whole point of that is that it's contested territory. That's why recognizing Jerusalem as the capital is probably not a good idea, because who even owns Jerusalem?
It's a great idea, because if you're aligned with the country and they're telling you this is their capital, you can either recognize it like you would for a country that you're aligned with, or play this game where you're like, okay, we're all going to promise it, and then
If this country in question is going to continue to ask for American military assistance, knowing that this conflict has been perpetuated for 73 years and the government in power, Netanyahu's government's goal is to continue to perpetuate the conflict and not find a solution that creates a two-state solution, a final, I don't want to use the word final solution, a final conclusion to this conflict, something that everyone could live with. He has no interest in doing that. And so if we're going to give his government rewards, we're going to need something in return. Or all we're doing is saying, perpetuate the conflict, let it go as long as possible. No worries. We'll just back you. We'll back you. We'll back you. We'll give us our money. We'll give you our money. We'll give you money for 73 years all the way today. We'll just give. If we're going to do that, I would like to know that our military investments in the future could be lessened, or that, you know, the tensions and fighting in the region could be lessened if we can get to a conclusion. I don't want to just endlessly dump American munitions into a war that we have no game plan to solve, no game plan to end. Like in Ukraine, it's pretty simple. The Ukrainians say, push the Russians out. Okay, that's a pretty simple game plan. We have the idea. We have an idea of what the goal in mind is. When it comes to Israel-Palestine, we have no idea. We have no frame of reference.
not actually deliver on it. Do you think it's weird that Bill Clinton, George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama all made this promise and never delivered?
No, because the whole point of the capital of Jerusalem and moving the embassy to Jerusalem.
Imagine that probably what happened is they promised it on the campaign trail because Americans largely like Israel. Then they'd walk into the White House and they'd be like, ah, man, this is a little bit more complicated than I thought. Oh, this would really piss off this group, this group, this group, this group. And, you know, if we're going to do this, we should get something out of it. I mean, this is pretty good leverage for us in negotiation. Like, I would imagine that's probably why they made the promise and then went back on it.
Is that Jerusalem is partially contested territory, that there's a huge issue about who actually owns which parts of Jerusalem that need to be resolved, that the Trump administration didn't move us any closer to resolving before just smacking the embassy down in Jerusalem and saying, oh, look, we did a good thing. But all it did was increase tensions in the area. It didn't help anything. It didn't do anything good.
That is true. The largest terrorist attack in Israeli history happened under the Trump administration. Oh, wait, that was last month under Biden.
What did Biden do to increase hostility between...
Well, we do have an intelligence base over there. Why did that fail?
I don't know what any of those things have to do. So part of the reasons why the people in the Gaza Strip are so incensed at people in Israel is partially because of, you brought these up, the Abraham Accords. None of those bilateral peace agreements were impressive. They were already with countries that had had relatively normal relationships with...
Well, not normal relationship. A lot of them were like normalizing. They were already on the path for normalizing. They've been like that for like the greater part of a decade now. It's just that Jared Kushner was almost like right place, right time to get some of those deals formalized.
Israel for...
I mean, I assume like he had to give a smile, a nudge, and a wink. Like he had to talk to them, but it wasn't Jared Kushner's deep political diplomatic experience that created that opportunity.
years. They didn't involve any of the actual countries that have a lot of issues with Israel, such as Jordan, such as Syria, such as Iran. And the only thing it did was continue to antagonize relations between Israel and Palestine because there were more peace treaties being signed in the Middle East without any explicit statement on what would be done with the contested territory.
Because it is a myth that this Israel-Palestine thing is the key to recognition for the state of Israel amongst these countries. Once you take that off the table and then you start negotiating with these other nations directly, you have all these places that are, you are right, they were working with Israel like kind of under the table while pretending that they still didn't recognize them, but getting at least a few of them to start the process of coming forward and recognizing the nation is progress. And that did happen.
Yeah, but it's progress in an area that doesn't matter, and it's making regressions in areas that do matter.
Why would that not matter? It's like the broader, it's like the broader Middle East.
Because these countries were already communicating with each other more or less, and now all it's done.
And by the way, one of the foundations of this.
And again, are we going to talk about the fact that, like, for example, the Bahrain normalization unwound? It unwound once the Israelis invaded Gaza. There is a possibility here where any progress we make could be undermined by future violence between the Israelis and the Palestinians, as the people of these countries, much more than the governments, in my experience, get angry at their governments, get mad at their governments for not acting. And you know, I gotta say, if you're an Arab leader scared of your own people, you might, on occasion, have to actually listen to them. I'm just saying it's going to be a lot easier to keep the region peaceful if we can get a strong deal. And I think that all this normalization that we're pursuing is going to be a lot more stable and a lot more likely to succeed if we find a resolution to the conflict.
This alliance is the fact that Iran is a regional power that they're all trying to check in the area. So again, hostility towards Iran, trying to isolate them as a strategy, also ended up leading to this recognition.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, you're telling me Saudi Arabia needed a bilateral peace agreement with Israel to fight with Iran?
No, I'm saying that using their shared enemy rather than this conflict between Israel and Palestine as the entry point towards recognition is a better strategy.
Yeah, but the conflict between Israel and Palestine is like one of the defining conflicts in the region. And Trump didn't move any closer towards that, and in a lot of ways hurt our ability to resolve it by aggressively acknowledging a capital and moving an embassy to a place in contested territory, and then in signing peace agreements without including the Palestinians in any of the talks. The same way that he did the Doha agreements with the Taliban without including the Afghanistan government. The same way that he agreed to pull out of Syria without consulting any of the Kurdish people that were about to be mowed down by an invading Turkish force.
But why would, again, I need to negotiate with the Palestinians to talk about this alliance that you're building against Iran?
Because Israel-Palestine is like the contested territory in the Middle East that needs to be
that is a contested
solved.
territory. You realize that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. They could have this issue, this border issue that is over here, but the main issue is that these countries are all natural enemies of Iran, and you're trying to build an alliance.
Here's the thing. Here's a good example. Iran is a Shia country, right? And all calculations on how Iran, like, foreign policy should work, them sending weapons to Hamas should be confusing. But it isn't, because they also have an opponent in Israel. They align in that way. Whereas if Israel was able to make a deal with the Palestinians, was able to make a deal with whatever authority is going to end up governing Gaza, and with the West Bank Authority, deal with the occupied territory, find a conclusion, it's going to be much harder for Iran to attack Israel if different groups in the West Bank and in Gaza are bound by treaties. They could still use Hezbollah, but they also then cannot funnel weapons to Hamas, and Hamas be using them to attack Israel if they're able to find a conclusion. And therefore, Israel is safer. And if Israel's safer, and if this issue is resolved, Iran's argument on, oh, look, we're funding the resistance of the Palestinian people, it's not there anymore. That argument's dead. It's going to be easier for, I think, Middle Eastern nation states to work with Israel if they wanted to counter Iran, if this is an interest you have, if this issue is resolved. I mean, it got to the point where Israel, and this is a real thing, Israel wouldn't participate in certain operations in the Middle East out of fear that Israel's participation would make it so other nation states wouldn't want to participate by just being associated with Israel and what that would mean for their regime and their image.
To counterbalance that.
No,
like
you're
one
not.
has
Nobody
nothing to do with
cares.
the
We're
other.
not trying to build an alliance to counter Iran in the Middle East. That's just not.
What are you talking about? Have you ever seen the map of like all the bases that we have surrounding Iran?
How
like,
long have those bases existed? Since
why
the
are we
Cold
trying to,
War? Do you think
why
they're
are
gonna
we
fight
trying to,
against Iran? They're
why
fighting
are we,
against the Soviet
I said
Union.
counterbalance. Why are we trying to negotiate a nuclear deal even under the Biden administration with Iran if we're not trying to keep them in check?
Because nuclear, like anti-nuclear proliferation is one of like the stated goals of the entire world at the moment. So we try to discourage essentially everybody from approaching nuclear weapons.
So your position is that we're not trying to keep the Iranians in check as a foreign policy goal that transcends a bunch of different administrations.
My position is that if we
are doing that. That is true.
wanted to prevent Iran from approaching nuclear weapons, the best way to do that was through that joint plan of action, the Iranian nuclear deal that Donald Trump pulled us out of.
That's a nice way of not answering the question after you're saying that we're not trying to limit Iran.
No, I don't think we're trying to build a coalition against Iran in the Middle East.
What are you talking? Of course we are. We're trying to have a check on Iranian expansion. Of course we are.
Where is Iran expanding to?
Well, right now they're expanding their influence into Iraq, or do you deny that they have a lot of
Iran
influence
and
in the new
Iraq
Iraqi
have been,
government?
Yeah, but the way to do that is to build military alliances?
Yes.
Okay, I disagree.
I mean, wait, hold on. Let me just.
Sorry, this is frozen. The screen's frozen. I don't know why. There we go. Fixed.
Let me just ask you a question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think, as a strategy, I don't know, against, let me just make up a country that might.
I wish this was the debate than the Republican debate. Somebody just said this in Go to Chat, and I agree. I wish this was the debate instead of the Republican debate.
Like want to aggress as a strategy against like Russian aggression, that we could have an alliance like a North American like alliance, like something like NATO, and that would be a check against Russian expansion in the future if you just align those countries militarily.
NATO was created to counter the Second World, not one country.
Second World, like multiverse? Like what do you mean?
In the Cold War, you have the First World, which are the Western aligned powers, and you have the Second World, that are the Soviet aligned powers.
Sorry, I was watching a movie before
the
this.
Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact is what NATO was created to serve as a counterbalance
but it still exists.
It's the same reason that when the Cold War ended, there was a question about what is NATO's purpose, what is NATO's identity, and the amount of trust in NATO and the amount of like belief in NATO in Europe was going down, and then the Russians invaded Ukraine, and then it skyrocketed. And then more nation states started to join NATO. I mean, there were nation states that joined NATO in the early 2000s in preparation for this type of an event, but the public perception of NATO and recent additions to NATO in Finland, Sweden, etc., that was after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it seems that the Russians have found a way to give NATO a purpose in the modern era.
And we still admit new members as a counterbalance towards Russian aggression, because Russian expansion west predates the Soviet Union. It's the whole history of the nation. The reason we have that alliance there is, I mean, the original reason was keep Russia out and keep Germany down, because we want to prevent conflict from breaking out on the European continent, because the last time that happened in a major way, well, the last two times were 2 world wars. So yeah, you do build military alliances in specific regions to check an expanding power. Like, it seems like you're just arguing this to argue this.
I'm not arguing to argue it. You're trying to make it sound like these random bilateral peace agreements with countries that are already incredibly friendly towards us and pretty friendly towards Israel means anything. Why not work towards moving to normalizing relationships with Iran instead of being intensely provocative towards them?
They never formally like recognized Israel. What are you talking about?
They were already communicating and trading and ending more or less hating hostilities.
In a bunch of these countries, even though they're allies with us and they're allies and we're allies with Israel, if you have an Israeli passport in your Israeli passport stamp in your passport, you couldn't even go like to both countries. This is one of the reasons why with the State Department you have to get 3 different passports sometimes if you're traveling between this region. But yeah, like, of course, obviously.
I think if the goal is to reduce tensions in the region, then the goal should be the normalization of relationships with Iran. That has been like the key goal for foreign policy for probably the past 20 years, or 20 or 30 years. Before
normalization of what? I do not believe that the Bush administration was that interested in normalization of relations with Iran. I don't know where that would come from. The Obama administration was more interested. Trump wasn't at all. And I mean, he killed Soleimani, for God's sakes. And Biden showed some interest in it. He appointed a special envoy, but the Iran deal was never revived. So it seems he's not Obama, he's not Trump, he's Biden. He's in some like weird middle ground between those two states. I think closer to Obama, but still not he doesn't have a lot of impetus to rush right now, especially since the Iranians are also helping the Russians supply their war effort.
Before Bush identified Iran as the axis of evil, that was our goal. It was towards normalizing relationships with Iran. That was part of what the Iranian nuclear deal was for. It was,
Except,
guys, if you can tie all of this into the Trump.
okay,
sure.
except the Iranian nuclear deal emboldened the Iranians. It put them into a position where their neighbors ended up fearing them, and that.
What? Okay, Iraq already feared the Iranians, and the Iranians were already Iranian-backed militias in Iraq before the nuclear deal. The Iranians were already funneling millions upon millions of dollars, $750 million a year to Hezbollah every single year. They were already funneling weapons to Hamas since, like, I think the early 90s. Wait, why I actually think it might have been the early 90s. I know Hamas took over in 2006, but I think they were funneling weapons to them before, and if not, then they've been funneling weapons since the early 2000s. Either way, before the Iran deal, since like the end of the Bush administration, at the very least, right? They were involved in the Syrian civil war before the Iran deal was made. They were funneling weapons to Iranian-backed militias, sending those militias into Syria. Soleimani was organizing them. They were, war criming about and defending the Assad regime. Hezbollah was as well. I mean, they were engaging in those types of aggressive actions. I mean, Yemen, another example of that. That was what, 2013 when that popped off and they started shipping weapons over? All of this was going on with or without the Iran deal. And when the Iran deal was implemented and they started to implement the Iran deal, these things didn't stop. Just like they were happening before, but they didn't stop when the Iran deal was implemented, because the purpose of the Iran deal, and this was the conservative critique of the Iran deal, is that the Iran deal did not address these issues. They did not address the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. They did not address the Iranian militias in Syria. They did not address the funneling of weapons into to the Houthis. Not address the funneling of weapons to Hezbollah. Hezbollah was usually the big one that conservatives would go to. And so their critique was, look, how can we make a deal with these guys and unfreeze their money? People say, oh, like Obama sent Iran money. It wasn't we sent them money. It's that we unfroze their own money and then gave it to them. So it wasn't like money that was ours. It was money that was theirs that we had frozen a long time ago when the Iranian Revolution happened in 1979. That the Obama argument was, all these things are bad. We can still try to limit Iranian influence in these countries while also trying to pursue denuclearization. But we cannot pursue denuclearization if you're just trying to basically do an omnibus bill to resolve every conflict we have with Iran all in one sitting. In fact, Obama would go further to say that the Iran deal could be used as a launching pad to also address these issues as well. I don't know if there was any merit to that. I'd like to hope that there was merit to that. Either way, we'll never know because the deal got scrapped. And then after the deal got scrapped, the quote-unquote moderates, and of course this is relative to Iranian politics, took a beating because the conservatives in the country, the right in the country in Iran, pointed to them and said, look, you made a deal with the Americans, and what did they do? They backstab you, like they always do. See, you dumbo, goofy-ass looking motherfucker, shouldn't have done that. Now we're not going to make those deals with those American tards anymore.
And that ended up setting up the impetus for this potential alliance.
I don't think it was money from the revolution time. I believe at least some of it was money from the revolution time. It was for some weapons contract with the Shah, with the Shah's government in Iran that we never fulfilled. They paid for, but we never gave them the weapons for. And it was giving them the money that was internationally recognized as Iranian dough. I know that was part of it. And that was the airplanes full of cash that the conservatives talk about that was given over to the Iranians in the middle of the night. I know Fox News really liked to rant about it at the time, but I think it was other stuff as well. I think it also had to do with sanctions, but that was part of it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I guess we won't get into the Syrians or the Afghanistan conflict or anything like that. But yeah, I think that time and time again, I think that Donald Trump pursued things that didn't matter. They gave him, I guess, photo ops. We got this. Every conservative touts this peace in the Middle East that didn't really happen at all.
I didn't say peace in the Middle East.
I didn't say you did. I said that a lot of Trumples and a lot of these people talk about peace in the Middle East or the historic importance of these peace agreements. They aren't. They aren't that really. Obviously, as we see today, they didn't get us any closer towards normalizing relations with the people that matter, like Iran, like Syria, like Lebanon, like figuring out what was going on in Palestine. Obviously, the situation in Afghanistan, him, again, kicking the can down the road so we wouldn't have to deal with that in his administration with the Taliban was deplorable. Abandoning our Kurdish allies in Syria after they helped us eliminate ISIS, or at least in parts of Syria, and abandoning them to the Turkish army, that was deplorable. Not doing anything about Crimea and somehow pretending like he would have stopped.
The Crimea happened in 2014. Who was president? Was that Trump?
I'm sorry, did Russia pull all their troops out for the 4 years that Donald Trump was president?
No, but like that
So,
happened.
clearly that didn't matter.
That happened in 2014, and the Trump administration was heavily arming the Ukrainians. Like,
Yeah,
more
it's been a
so than
policy
the Obama administration.
It's been a policy to sell them weapons, but.
Yeah, he ramped that up, even though people were saying that he
Well, he ramped that up. He also got impeached.
No, look, again, this kills me. They're saying Trump ramped it up, but it was Congress who approved the aid, and then Trump who then jumped in the middle of that process and was like, I'm not going to stop this necessarily, but you got a few things to tell me about that Hunter Biden fella. How big is his cock, really? And then, he got impeached over it.
Impeached for threatening to take it away because they wouldn't do investigations on it. Allegedly. Well, he was impeached for it.
Listen, I heard that was a perfect
It wasn't allegedly. It was, we know.
phone call. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Any43, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub. Hope you're doing well. 38 months, man. You've been with the channel for a bit. Hey, you know what? We're going on hour 5. Oh my God, we've been streaming for 5.5 hours. We're almost got a whole 6-hour stream. I'm going to be tuning out in a bit. Well, like once this debate's over, we get through enough of it, I'm going to tap out. But if you guys want to help support the channel, you can go to DylanBurns.tv, DylanBurns.TV. Subscribe, support the channel, donate. All of the profits go back into the work we do here at Dylan Burns TV, both doing on-the-ground war journalism and talking about politics on the internet. Hope you're all doing well. If you also got a Amazon Prime, you connect it to your Twitch account, you will have a Twitch Prime, which is a free sub, which you can drop in Twitch chat, which I would greatly appreciate as well. Or if neither of those options work for you, but you have a Patreon, we do have that as well. Dylan Burns TV on Patreon.
Yeah, I don't know so you're a crime guy. How do we do a law and order president who's facing like 4 different sets of indictments in the country?
Listen. All I'm going to say is that if you think that any other president, if they had these alleged crimes waged against them, would be prosecuted in the same way, I think you would definitely be lying. The fact of the matter is they're...
What do you mean prosecuted in the same way? I mean, it'd be weird because some of the crimes are financial, right? About like lying about net worth. And I don't know if like if Biden had a business dealing with Deutsche Bank and then lied about his net worth or talked about his net worth in a way that wasn't completely honest in order to get a deal with Deutsche Bank at a lower interest rate than other normal competitors were offering him for like golf program. Like, I can't think of a scenario that has been even similar to that in American history. Like, I can think of what, Jimmy Carter giving up the peanut farm? Like, when we go through all these crimes one by one, like, can we really say that if we piled all of these on top of any other president that they'd be safe? If we found out that Barack Obama had his staff illegally access voting machines, would he be would he be just let off the hook? If we knew that Barack Obama was trying to call Georgia's Secretary of State and get them to change the vote so he performs better in an election, would we be letting him off the hook? I really don't think so, especially if he followed it up by calling for a suspension of the U.S. Congress, of the U.S. Constitution, since he didn't win the election. And that's not even talking about like most of there's like so many. I think I'll have to sit down one day and just do a full list of every single crime that Donald Trump is facing and the evidence against it. It'd be a long ass stream. I think it would take up the entirety of a stream in order to do it. But I think it's worthwhile because I think people just like to say, it's a witch hunt. But if you look at the facts of the case, Donald Trump committed multiple crimes. And it's not even like a question anymore. We know he committed multiple crimes. And so the argument is no longer, did Donald Trump commit these crimes? The argument is now, well, I mean, he's the president, though. And, like, we know other presidents probably committed crimes and they got away with it. So why don't we just let him get away with it, too? Would this defense work in any other civilized democracy? I really don't think so.
prosecuting him because he's the orange man, and that is the only reason.
Can you give me an example of which of the indictments are comparable to past crimes that you believe that presidents have committed that haven't been pursued?
I mean, you could prosecute. So one of the things that they used was in Georgia, they try to use a RICO statute against President Trump. Now, you could have actually used that against all presidents. Ben Shapiro made this argument back in like 2010 as a way to deal with their administration as a group. But like nobody ever wanted to do that because presumably opening that can of worms on past administrations should set a precedent that you could do this to any successive administration. But President Joe Biden, even though he's asleep, decided to have
It would still need to be in service of a criminal enterprise, which you would still need to prove. Which is the problem, because Donald Trump was involved in a criminal enterprise.
Have his attorney general, his Justice Department break those norms anyway, and now it's considered a potential standard going forward that when you leave office in the United States of America, the next guy can come in and prosecute you. Even the Obama administration.
What does that mean? Biden isn't the one pushing the RICO statute. Biden isn't the one going after his Deutsche Bank dealings. Biden isn't the one doing this. It's either we have independent prosecutors in these states in question, or I think we have like one like appointed like special prosecutor for the federal level. I forget. But point is, Biden isn't the one making the decisions to go after, or we will go after him here, we will go after him there. In fact, he has been quite reserved on that front. It was other people and other judges and other criminal systems that ended up making those decisions. Criminal systems that he doesn't have direct control over. He doesn't have control of the New York DA. He doesn't have control of the Georgia criminal justice system.
Administration didn't do that. Even the Obama administration didn't do that for the Bush administration. And by the way, the crimes that he was accused of were actually torture related, ordering it, covering it up, detaining people in Guantanamo Bay in violation of their civil rights without charges. And Obama, like, you know, you say what you want, and whether you agree or disagree with this, he seemed to set a precedent that the Trump administration actually followed when they were in office, which was we don't look backward, we look forward. But Biden's like, nah, never mind. We're going to look backward for this particular guy.
So,
and
yeah, so
this
firstly,
is destructive to our entire process.
So firstly, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the DOJ is working underneath Biden, or that Biden is ordering any of these investigations.
Who appointed Merrick Garland?
There's no. Who appoints the chair of the Federal Reserve? Do you think Biden sets the interest rates?
Who appointed Merrick Garland?
Why do you think the appointment is what
The
determines
Federal
the
Reserve.
policy?
The Federal Reserve is a unique, like, institution in the United States of America that does not directly serve under the executive branch. So this is why they're not analogous. The Department of Justice is something that is directly under the auspices of the president.
So when Barr was
Is this debate recent? It's 3 days old, so yes.
contradicting direct statements that Donald Trump made, was Barr working under the direct order of Donald Trump?
He was under the direct order of President Trump. I mean, one of the things that you could actually ding Trump for is that he didn't fire people enough. Like, for some reason he wouldn't. For some reason he wouldn't fire. It's true. Like, a lot of these people just ended up quitting the administration. Like, he didn't fire.
A lot of people, I mean, what is it? Rex Tillerson, John Bolt. I mean, even before he got into the administration, he had to fire people because they're acting as foreign agents for other countries. One of the biggest critiques of the Trump administration was its high turnover rate, leading to a lack of consistency in policy. Probably part of the reason why he was flip-flopping on foreign policy issues so much is because first Rex Tillerson, then we go through John Bolton, then we go through this person, then we go through that person. And if you're going through all these different people as they whisper into Trump's ear quicker and quicker, over and over and over and over and over again, like, there's no consistent ideology, no consistent framework that the administration is working within.
Anthony Fauci had every power to do so. He had every power to fire his own attorney general.
Gotcha. So just as a matter of like recent historical record, the DOJ does not work under command of the President of the United States.
Of course it does.
That is a fantastic claim. I'd be curious if you could point to investigations where the President of the United States ordered the DOJ to begin investigating enemies of the President.
Except for Trump. That because he did try to do that. He did specifically try to do that.
A president can order the DOJ
We're
to
not asking
examine
the
it.
president. He could make that order. He could theoretically, but to do so would be an unbelievable breach of norms, which unfortunately we became a bit accustomed to under Donald Trump. But the idea that the DOJ works at the behest as the personal prosecutorial body of the president to go after opponents of the president that's an insane claim. And Biden himself has made contradictory statements, as though Garland has made contradictory statements saying as much that these things do not happen.
Yeah.
It does not happen. There was no communication.
This is like saying that if Pete Buttigieg over at Transportation says something that Biden disagrees with, that Pete Buttigieg is not working for the Biden administration. Sure, you can say specific things, and maybe the Trump administration as a whole believed in a greater separation between the DOJ and the administration proper. But it has been long precedent amongst especially Democratic administrations that there is a close relationship with their office and the DOJ. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was appointed as the AG under John F. Kennedy. Eric Holder was called Barack Obama's wingman. Barack Obama would speak about a particular case.
William Barr was called Donald Trump's sword and shield, and in the end, he was one of his harshest critics.
I mean, now you're contradicting your point.
I'm not. My point is literally that the Attorney General and that the Department of Justice, especially in politically charged investigations, along with the rest of our intelligence community, is supposed to work with some level of separation. Otherwise, why would it have been a big deal for Donald Trump to pull in Comey and have conversations? Couldn't he just order the FBI to stop an investigation? Couldn't he just order the CIA, Christopher Wray, to not look into things? Of course not. The idea that all of our intelligence and all of these executive orgs work for the personal pleasure of the president, especially in regards to politically sensitive topics, especially in regards to investigations of himself or political opponents, is a fantastic idea. You can try to talk around that all you want, but it would be an unimaginable breaching of norms, and anybody that understands any part of how the United States government works would instantly know that the idea that the executive prosecutorial body of the Department of Justice can work under the personal pleasure of the President of the United States.
The personal pleasure of the president. Sorry.
That's just an outrageous
So, like,
claim.
the trick that you're doing right now is you're saying personal pleasure when I said that they work under the office of the president. Like, don't think I didn't notice that shift.
You're not saying they work under the office of. You're saying they take direction from. You said they take direction from.
You can order a member of the Department of Justice. I believe Scalia, when they reviewed the special prosecutor statute, was talking about how you cannot create through the executive branch.
I think the last president to try something like this might have been like, I don't know, like, I can't even think. I think like John Adams maybe. Like remember he went like hard against the press, super unconstitutional. But that's not the same because, but still, I can't think of any other frame of reference.
A position that is superior to the executive branch. Like, not only is what I'm saying the norm in America, yes, the president can fire his AG, FBI director, anybody you want to run down the list of executive offices, he can fire them. For sure. But on top of that, it has been backed up by Supreme Court precedent. Like Justice Scalia, the late Scalia, his writings are clear. There is no office under the executive branch that is superior to the head of the executive branch, which is the president of the United States.
Okay.
Like, this is like a basic civics lesson right now.
Not only is it not a basic civics lesson, you are so dead wrong. This would be such an unbelievable breach of norms that it would be the lead story, probably internationally, if it came out that the president of the United States was ordering the DOJ to go and investigate
This happened under the Obama administration. He asked Eric Holder to look into the Ferguson case. He asked Eric Holder to review the Trayvon Martin case. Like, what are you talking about?
What does looking into the Trayvon Martin case have to do with going after your direct political opponents?
They're not like the politically sensitive cases.
They're not politically sensitive, like Ferguson riots.
Of the investigation of political opponents. But if any of that information comes out, I could be wrong. So you're telling me then that of all the indictments that have been released,
that can't be said. That had to be a disingenuous point. I don't want to assume like actual justice warrior is acting disingenuously, but that's not a good point. Oh, it's different. Well, actually, going after political opponents is perfectly within the bounds of the office because Ferguson was the cop. Was Obama's political opponent? Was Trayvon Martin his political opponent? What did that have to do with going after your political opponents? What did that have to do with stopping investigations into your side?
With all the evidence detailing the numerous Trump wrongdoings
that is what the Department of Justice is supposed to do. It's supposed to be like, wait a second, I think on that local level, we didn't have a fair trial in X, Y, and Z case. We have been given some evidence to believe that, so we're going to do our own investigation to find out. That is actually what the Department of Justice is supposed to do, not go after your political opponents. which is what they do in extremely corrupt, fledgling democracies.
All of these are they fabrications of the Biden DOJ? Are they not trustworthy?
I didn't say that they're necessarily fabrications. I just pointed out that these are cases that would not be brought against somebody not named Donald Trump.
Okay,
Like,
can you give me an example of somebody else that's held on to secret records that have been specifically requested by the federal government for over a year that haven't been returned?
I mean, there's a specific case for Bill Clinton under the courts where he was arguing about whether or not his recordings were of a personal nature or a classified nature. The court actually ruled with the Clinton administration. There are instances where.
Wait, do you think that's at all comparable to what we're talking about?
Well, that one has a Supreme Court case to back it up.
I'm not asking. I'm asking if that's comparable. You're saying a personal voice recording he made. That the argument.
There was more to what the Clintons had, but like the court ruled with them, so it's not comparable because that's already been adjudicated right now.
Well, no, it's not comparable because a personal recording is not something that the executive has declared to be secret, top secret.
Listen, a lot of these classified documents exist in a weird gray area.
No, they don't. It was crystal clear. It was
they
not
do,
weird and gray.
I'll explain why.
Donald Trump. There's audio. We have audio from Donald Trump. Can we play the audio? Is this it?
And to former President Trump. This evening, you will hear the audio recording.
Here it is.
Oh, with Milley, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him. Wow. We looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look.
Trump making it clear the information is sensitive.
It is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this.
Special counsel's
No,
indictment.
they cut it off. They should have played the rest of it. He even goes on to say that he could have declassified it at the time, but now it's too late. So he's acknowledging the fact that these are secret documents that he cannot show anybody. And that's why he's saying it's off the record, as if that's like a magical, like, off the record, bam. It's like, you're a cop, you can't lie to me. It's like this, just saying it's off the record doesn't mean that, someone still couldn't leak it, which is what happened. Like that right there, invasion plans for Iran, which is what is implied to be there. Invasion plans for Iran that are not declassified are 100% not okay to show random journalists and staffers because you said first it's off the record on top of your giant pile of classified documents. That is not okay.
Because the president can declassify anything that he wants.
But
in the audio, he specifically says, I could have declassified it, but I didn't. So he acknowledged at the time of the audio how the classification process works. But afterwards, when he got caught, it was, well, actually, I'm the president. So therefore, by nature, by its very existence of these documents, since these documents exist in my possession, they are therefore classified, which is never how the declassification process has worked. Never.
He wasn't the president. He wasn't the president.
No,
when he had them.
he was the president when he took them. This is why you end up with a weird problem.
It's not a weird problem at all.
He took them when he had the right to do it. The the Secret Service set up Mar-a-Lago for these documents to be a place where they could be stored.
Wait, no, they didn't.
Yeah, they did. When he was the president,
they were not set up to indefinite.
Not only is that not true, and it was true that they set up something for classified documents, it's probably true, but these documents were not known to be in his possession. The National Archives pursued him, was like, yo, do you have these documents? You got to return them. Like, you can't have these. These are not declassified. And what did Trump do? Trump had his staff go and turn off the security cameras and hide it somewhere else in the building before saying, I don't know, I don't have them. I don't have them. And that's why people raided Trump's compound. That's why Trump's compound, his place in Mar-a-Lago, was raided, is because he was hiding the documents from the National Archives and trying to keep them. He didn't return them all. He only returned some and tried to keep others.
Indefinitely store classified
I didn't
material.
say indefinitely. You're adding a qualifier.
Well, no,
that I
but the
didn't say.
indefinite part, because he was no longer president. That's the whole point.
My point is that it's a weird situation where he's able to move these things because he's the president, but then he stopped being president. So then it's like, okay, now, like, how do you?
Jesus. What is it with
How do
this
you
video?
adjudicate?
I think YouTube really doesn't want me to watch this.
You
Like,
adjudicate it incredibly
we
similar to the way
haven't-
that it always has been done for past
We've
presidents.
never had a case like
we had.
this.
It happened with Obama, where after you are leaving office, the National Archives will do a check to see if documents are missing, if they need to make a request for stuff, and then afterwards they make a request to the person leaving the White House. I'm pretty sure for Obama, there were a ton of boxes that were brought back. They do their little checks, and once they have everything, they leave. There's an official process for doing this. They gave Donald Trump over a year to comply with these orders, and he was explicitly moving things around. Okay.
Not only moving, he had his staff turn off his security camera so it wasn't documented that he was moving him around. He knew what the fuck he was doing.
Like an old grandma trying to hide her cookies from like the grandkids coming over. He was like moving shit around in Mar-a-Lago to try to avoid. Not only was he doing that, he was also he was instructing his legal counsel to lie. If Donald Trump felt like he had the authority to declassify anything indefinitely into the future, which by the way, one, is so ridiculous, I know even you don't believe that, and two, isn't even true because there are certain things, like I'm pretty sure the Department of Energy has strict rules about the declassification of nuclear secrets.
There's a
that
declassification process.
The president cannot unilaterally, by his own ways, declassify nuclear secrets. So even if I did grant you everything else,
Again, Trump himself in the leaked audio is documented as saying, I could have declassified it, I didn't.
which I wouldn't because it's absurd, he can't even declassify some of this. He didn't even have the authority to do it.
I mean, the Department of Energy, first of all, again, works under the auspices of the president. But again, I was not making the point that they were all declassified. I meant that he can view and move classified documents. But we're distracting off the policy issue because you don't want to talk about the Biden administration policy.
No, he was saying, how can you support, as a tough on crime guy, somebody who is a criminal for the highest office in the land? That I think that's relevant. I think that's relevant. If this is like, what would stop Trump from doing this again? If he gets away with it, what would stop Trump from doing the same exact thing again? And next time he's showing like the DoorDash delivery driver, like the location of different nuclear launch sites.
Policy, because you don't want to talk about who would be a better president. Instead, you're talking about these indictments, which again, we'll wait for them to be adjudicated. Innocent until proven guilty. I think that the president has a natural right, a God-given right, to store classified documents in his bathroom, and we'll see how the courts let that play out.
Okay, we can move on.
I don't know if that joke played well. I mean, it's haha, but it's not a defense.
From this. So just to be clear, you think that the President of the United States can violate every single agency that works under the executive branch at any point in time because they work underneath him?
No,
so if there's a FDA policy, if he wants to shit in your food, if there's a policy with the DEA, if he wants to shit in a nuclear reactor, if there's a policy with literally anything, he can do whatever he wants.
The DEA controls nuclear reactors?
The Department of Energy, sorry. For the DEA, I guess shit in your joint, okay? You're telling me that the President of the United States at any point in time can violate any executive agency rule because he's the president and they exist underneath him. That's your stated. That's exactly what you said.
I didn't say any. That's literally not what I said.
That is literally what you said. You said these agencies exist under him, so if he wants to violate these standards, he can do it.
He can fire people at these agencies. Like, that is a fact. That's what I said. That's what we're talking about.
Then do you think
he can also direct
before?
these agencies to especially to the extent that he's covered by the law?
I see people in gutter chat asking how you get me to react to a video. Sometimes you can just link it in chat, either site chat or gutter chat. Site chat is a better bet because site chatters are awesome. That's at DylanBurns.tv. That's where Kerfitten, Escol, Dragon Hughes, and the rest of them are hanging out right now. And Geek. Or you can email it to me at DylanBurnsTV@gmail.com. The most surefire way for me to react to something, unless it's like a super big ass time commitment, is money. Because I am a greedy capitalist pig.
But of course, he is not able to be subordinated by the agencies that exist under his own office.
For real, you can just email it to me or drop it in chat at some point, and there's like a 50-50 chance I might pick it up. But like, don't abuse the linking system, because there's like some people, I think it's like his name's Animation in chat, he'll link like 7 times, like 7 different videos, each like an hour long in a single stream.
Congress can hold him accountable because we have a separation of powers. The Supreme Court can hold him accountable because we have a separation of powers.
Okay, that's just okay. So that's what, so you believe that the president has unlimited authority.
I didn't say unlimited
despite the fact that
authority.
Donald Trump, underneath any of the executive stuff, despite the fact that Donald Trump himself literally said, I could have declassified these, but I didn't. He can still infinitely take, any president should be able to take whatever classified material they want and hold on to it into an infinite amount of time.
I didn't necessarily say that. I said, let's let the case be adjudicated and we'll see how it goes. And obviously no other president would be prosecuted for this.
Do you hear that? That's the sliminess seeping off. Come on. Come on. Even Trump acknowledged it at the time that he didn't have the ability to declassify it, and it wasn't declassified. You got to disagree with Trump on whether Trump had the authority to do that.
Well, I mean, but you can't give me a single example of a president making anything this flagrant of a breach of norms or of a violation of maintaining an indefinite hold on classified information that's being requested back by federal agencies. No other president has done anything like these things. But you're just saying for some reason, even though, for instance, we got a historic of a guy that's not even related to politics, Hunter Biden, I think, got a federal charge because he had an old video of himself doing drugs and owning a firearm. I don't know if that's like in the history of the United States, if anybody's caught a charge for something like that.
You don't think anybody's gotten a charge for lying on a firearms form when they fill it out to buy a firearm that they're not using drugs when they actually were?
Was that the claim that I just made?
But that's what he's actually charged with.
How do they know that he lied on that form?
Because you have to fill out this form.
I understand how buying a firearm works.
And he said that he wasn't under the influence of any substance. You're going to tell me that no American has ever been charged for lying on that form?
I'm saying that the idea of finding videos that are 5, 10 years old,
it was within the statute of limitations.
Using the video to say that, oh my God, I think he lied on his ATF form. That is an incredible charge. That is an incredibly abnormal charge. That is something you would very, very rarely, I don't know if I've ever heard of a case like that. And you can pretend that it's normal, but if you talk to any gun owner, the idea that the federal government is looking back on videos from 2012 to see if you lied on an ATF form, that is an incredibly political charge. That just would not normally be done.
I mean, first of all, he got a sweetheart plea deal, number one, originally, and then people know.
By the way, I'm not even saying that Hunter Biden shouldn't have been held accountable. If he was under the influence of drugs while purchasing a firearm, there should be penalties for that. Obviously, I don't think crack smokers should be the #1 armed group in the United States. The big crack should be a big firearm, big AR-15 as well. But this is abnormal. This doesn't happen often. The reason that this has happened is because Biden is in a very, famous family, and Hunter Biden is the son of the president, and they wanted to catch him for it, and so they found something for it.
Noticed it, so then they had to claw it back because it was so absurd.
But again, at the end of the day, you do the crime, you do the time, man.
Number one. Number
what was
two,
that sweetheart plea deal? About what?
He had to plead to like a misdemeanor, and he was going to skate on that charge.
Because he owed back taxes,
yeah, but
right?
the firearm thing was attached to it, but they were going to dismiss that as a part of the plea deal for the taxes.
Because most people don't have people going through old videos to try to determine if they lied on an ATF form. That's just
Listen, I don't have every case ever where people use video evidence to disprove something like this, but it's happened before.
I mean, if you say so.
People.
1 second, let me see. Ultimate Duckling in Gutter Chat just said, Dylan visiting Ukraine in first month of war, but can't be bothered to visit Gaza. You know what? You're right. I'm going to get a boat, and I'm going to break the Israeli blockade. I'm going to be the first Western journalist to do it. I'm going to call up my boys in Hamas. They're going to be like, Dylan, top G, thank you for smuggling all those weapons for it. I'm going to say, don't talk about that. But I need to get through the tunnels. I need to make a good react video. I need to ask Hamas fighters what they think about Hassan. And they're going to be like, of course, we love him. Come on. And then we'll have Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas fighters debate whether Hassan is based or cringed, okay? So I'm gonna go through the tunnels, or I'm gonna swim through the blockade. I'd love to go to Palestine one day. Getting into Gaza is not easy, especially during an invasion. There was an open border that I could pass to get into Ukraine. There was not one I could do to get into Gaza, and I don't have context on the ground. West Bank might be easier though.
We'll do video investigations to check if you're lying on your social security disability. Like the idea that people haven't posted video evidence of their crimes and then later, years later, been indicted on something like that is absurd. And also we have a huge regulatory state, which by the way is being increased by the Biden administration, and people get dinged based on ticky-tack violations and end up serving federal time for that all the time in this country.
What are bad regulations that Biden has passed you disagree with?
There's a ton of them. Like, first of all, like he's not letting these permits go through for the oil drilling. He repealed,
didn't Biden okay drilling on federal land? Wasn't that one of the more controversial
you can
things
say I'm okaying it on federal land and then make the claim like.
Just got the text. I'm leaving in an hour and a half to go evacuate civilians from, or at least attempt to evacuate civilians from. Well, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna be filming the process, but I'm gonna be filming with a civilian evacuation buddy who engages in that in Donetsk. Well, in the Donetsk region, not Donetsk city. Obviously, that's occupied. That's in an hour and a half. Just got the text. Dope. Finally, I've been trying to get this done for a bit now, but now it's confirmed. Okay. I gotta get my last bit of footage of this. Gotta get that done, and then I'm headed up north, and I'm gonna film with the mining crews, and then I'm done for the year. I'm done with the war. I'm done getting bombed. I'm done like walking through fucking minefields with the mining crews for a month. I'm done until next March. I'll still be publishing footage and stuff. I'll still be talking about the war, but at least I won't be directly, receiving the shelling. You know what sucks though? I'll be home for a month, and in a month I'll miss this country. In a month I'll miss this country. Everything will start reminding me of the war. I'll start feeling bad because I'm not here, and then I'll by January I'll be eager to come back. Just like a few months in, I start feeling maybe like a similar way about home, and I'm starting to feel that way about home right now. But I know immediately I go back, I'm gonna start seeing things. It's gonna remind me of this country. It's gonna remind me of the struggle going on here, and I'm gonna want to come back.
Like he does, that there's 4,000 unused permits, but then when you go through the details of it and you figure out that in order to drill for oil you need an exploration permit, then by the way only 1 out of every 10 maybe find something like that. It might even be a lower hit rate. Then you need a permit in order to have your drilling plan, and then you need additional permits in order to extract and transport and all that. So he can say, oh, I approved it on federal lands to sound good and whatnot, but in reality the proof
didn't dismantle the entire regulatory body of drilling and transporting fossil fuels, something that is pretty sensitive to the United States.
He ramped it up.
I don't think he's made substantial. Are you telling me that before you didn't need a permit to transport oil?
Nobody said you didn't need a permit, but he's slowing down the process of the permits with
How is that
additional
possible?
regulation.
U.S. oil production is at record highs right now. We are more energy independent than we have been in the history of the United States. His approval of drilling on federal land has been historic, because a lot of people on the left were mad at him for that. If you want to claim that there are other permit things in the way, I mean, yeah, there's a whole bunch of regulatory bullshit in the United States, but Biden didn't invent that. And I think, if anything, he's tried to work a bit against it as we've been struggling for energy independence from other countries.
What's the first food you'll eat when I get back? I know exactly. It's going to be Chipotle, man. It's Chipotle. Well, actually, I will be arriving back in the States 2 days before Thanksgiving. So it's going to be Chipotle, and then it's going to be Thanksgiving dinner with family. I couldn't think of a better way to come back to the United States.
Completely disagree. He definitely has been limiting the drilling on. He's definitely been limiting the drilling through this gumming up of the works of the permit system. This is why there was so much pressure on him, and this was specifically highlighted when gasoline prices were shooting up through the roof.
Yeah, I don't think that was because of Biden not allowing people to drill.
Why
in the
were
United
people
States.
even discussing and trying to defend the permits if this wasn't about that?
About what? About which thing?
Like, why were people even discussing the number of permits issued and the slowdown, and then the Biden administration was trying to defend it by saying, oh, there's 4,000 unused permits, which, by the way, are for oil and natural gas. Like, why was that whole conversation even happening?
Probably because
this
people that are
wasn't even a
trying, I don't
dispute?
think there was a legitimate conversation about that happening. I don't think people right now are having legitimate conversations about oil issues in the United States. Again, I'm pretty sure U.S. oil production is at historic highs at the moment. The idea that this is an issue that we're running into, that we're not making enough permits, that domestic drilling is down. If anything, I'm pretty sure the complaints have actually been, now that I remember, pretty sure the complaints have actually been the exact opposite, that a whole bunch of domestic oil firms have had the ability to increase their production of oil, but because they were worried that we came off peak oil, and because they're worried we're going to hit another economic slump, they've actually been intentionally holding back on supply and production, because they're worried that if they overproduce, they're going to drive themselves into lower profits, and then when the next economic disaster happens, they're going to be completely fucked like they just got over COVID. Those are the conversations that I remember hearing, that people were upset that domestic production was down intentionally, despite the fact that firms had the ability to increase production. Does anybody else remember hearing these conversations? Am I crazy?
Yeah, this sounds pretty made up, especially when you brought in the whole...
Okay,
especially when you brought the whole peak oil thing in, which was a nice little buzzword you toss in there. But a nice little pivot to like something abstract that really can't be fact-checked and all that. But the idea that...
Is peak oil a buzzword? Is peak oil a buzzword? I assume you'll be flying first class, buddy. It's economy. It is economy. First, I'm taking a plane to Scotland. That's economy. And then the other flight, like, again, it's economy, baby. I'm not doing first class. I don't got the money for that.
when gas prices
And even if I did have the money for that, would I want to spend the money on that? Not really.
were through the roof, that oil companies were intentionally not drilling to profit off those higher prices, basically flies in the face of any.
Somebody just asked a great question in chat. What is the how is the quality of KFC in Ukraine? Honestly, I would make the argument that it's probably the closest to the best KFC experience outside of the United States you get. It's pretty good. It is pretty good. It doesn't have the sweet tea I love so much. It's not sweet. It doesn't got, you know, a few items on the menu. You know, not a lot of the same spices are available to be put on the chicken, but it's still pretty good. It's still pretty good. And they've got their own, like the hash browns or the sandwiches. It's really good stuff.
Intentionally not drilling to profit off those higher prices basically flies in the face of any economic reality that you can fucking think of. Like, it's kind of absurd that you would make that argument. Now, granted,
How does that
are there
fly
some
in the face when OPEC literally themselves will raise and lower production depending upon what they want to do with oil prices? How does that fly in the face of economic reality?
Sure, they can do that, but the thing is, if you're a domestic oil producer in the United States of America, not subject to what is going on in OPEC, and you see those higher prices, the idea that you wouldn't, the way you profit is by increasing your production and selling at those higher prices.
You
like,
can,
this is basic economics. Higher prices draw in more people to invest in that industry in order to produce it.
No, first of all, you just gave the opposite take of basic economics, which is when prices are high, if you increase production, prices will necessarily fall, which is what the oil companies were worried about. They already had all of the major capital investment. They were worried about another huge price slump because that's what had happened. And
the way you profit off of higher prices is to sell at those higher prices.
Yeah, but if you sell your entire stock and prices plummet again, you're not going to be prepared. I think we just have a factual disagreement on what the arguments were over. I mean, people can go and look into it. I guess another
thing to avoid talking about Biden's failed record. I see your strategy.
Well, I mean, if you call Biden's failed record, I'm curious if you'd call Trump's record.
A stunning success.
Stunning success. Yeah, we can talk about the big thing that Trump ran on, the wall. Why was Biden able to get $1 billion concession from Mexico for investment into border security, and Donald Trump got a $0 investment from Mexico into?
I forgot about this. This was like a year ago. So Donald Trump ran on, and you know, it's been a few years. I doubt this is something people have forgotten, but just in case, Donald Trump ran, and one of his big pitches, in fact, I would say his pitch period, was building the wall. That's what he opened with. That's what he pitched all the time. People would chant it at his rally, and every time, you know, something cool would happen at a rally, like someone says, "I love you, Trump," or like a kid comes on stage and says, "Build the wall," he'll just say something along the lines of, "It's now 10 feet higher." And everybody go, "Wow," and they start screeching like fucking pigs in the audience. It was his pitch. He didn't get it done. In fact, Trump made a lot of promises, like eliminating all of the federal debt in 4 to 8 years. I didn't do it in 4 years, and I don't think he was going to do it in 8 years either, because it's an impossible task to do in that short period of time. In fact, not only did he not eliminate the federal debt in 4 to 8 years, he increased the deficit to record levels during his term in office. And so there's a lot of promises that he made that I'd like to see actual justice warrior, the fiscal conservative, respond to.
Border security.
Listen.
Biden was the only one who got actual direct contributions to border security from the Mexicans. Trump was not able to get that. What Trump would say, because Trump would not only say he was going to build the wall, but he was going to get Mexico to pay for it too. What he ended up doing is he ended up renegotiating NAFTA and said that in the renegotiation of NAFTA, Mexico pays for the wall. That's not true. He's saying just through economic production. It's just not true. It was a cope and a seethe.
At some point in time, the Trump administration, during the USMCA deal, decided that he was going to threaten harsher negotiations against Mexico if they didn't send agents to their southern border in order to stop people from flowing into this country. The Alamo government actually did do that. So even though they didn't say, here's $1 billion for whatever, they still sent their people to guard their southern border, because we all know what the strategy that they were doing. And by the way, Alamo...
Folks, thank you so much for the money. Thank you for the tier 1 sub. I appreciate it.
ran on the right of people in Latin America to immigrate to the United States, which is an interesting thing to run on, but whatever. It was to send his own soldiers down there. That was done by the Trump administration. That might not be this, oh, here's $1 billion for like vague investment and whatever.
It wasn't
That's
for vague
actual
investment, it was for border
substantive
security.
action right there.
And maybe substantive action, something that Trump never managed
I mean,
to
just
do.
look at the border crossings. Like, what does that $1 billion got us? We have 7 million, according to the CBP, his own agency, saying that they cross into the United States under Biden's watch. That is way more than
7
Trump.
million. Hold on. What is your number? 7
7
million what?
million border crossings
Over
under the
what
Biden
time
administration.
period?
Over the Biden administration's.
The last estimates I've seen show that there's like 13 to 15 million illegal immigrants, period, in the United States. You're telling me 7 million came in
7
2
million
years,
crossings,
3 years?
yes.
No. Hold on. Just
That's according to the CBD.
Sure. So here's a fact check at home, okay? Because I know that conservatives like to play fast and loose. Is it 7 million border crossings, or is it 7 million like catch and turn back, or is it 7 million confrontations at the border?
The number is 7 million border crossings, and as far as the getaways, it's about 1.5 million. According to the CBD.
You're telling me, so to be clear, you're saying it's 7 million people have come from
Total,
Mexico,
yes.
and then are now in the U.S., or that
Yes.
it was 7 million encounters by Border Patrol agents?
7 million at the border, 1.5 million just got away.
You didn't. So 7 million at the border was not.
I like that from that was so sassy. I like that from Destiny. One second, I heard something there. What was that? I heard a little Tweety Bird sing in the middle of that sentence. What was that right there? Ah, I love that.
Border crossing. It was encounters at the border. To be clear,
I mean, I
right?
could look up the number specifically.
It was
I actually had
encounters.
it up.
It was encounters. Sorry, I know it was encounters. So
they
in
listed
terms
it-
of when you talk about asylum seekers, the Biden administration is actually trying to do something about asylum seekers. They've worked with Latin American countries. We've already got 2 asylum welcome centers at Guatemala and Colombia so that we can start processing people. We're having them stop off there.
Oh,
instead of just saying,
that's a good backtrack to a Trump administration policy called Remain in Mexico.
That's fine, but the difference is Biden is actually capable of working with other people to get things done rather than Trump trying to do everything on his own, which he's unable to do so, and he can't even get like his own administration on board with doing something. Biden also has places in Ecuador and Costa Rica where they're also setting up these actual like asylum areas where they can start to process
Biden
people
also
instead of
gave
having-
a whole $1 billion to every city in the United States of America to deal with their migrants. A whole $1 billion. That's pretty impressive.
Wait, what is the point of that?
He gave a whole $1 billion to deal with the migrants that are in all these cities across the country.
Is that supposed to be a good point or a bad point?
It's called like almost no money since New York has already spent $5 billion on it.
$1 billion to each state
to
or
cities
each city?
overall. That's what he allocated to deal with the crisis.
When he allocated $1 billion to cities to deal with this crisis, was that just $1 billion?
Just $1 billion spread over the city.
Was it just $1 billion, or was this part of like a massive $100 billion package that was part of was it the American Reinvestment Plan, where he gave billions and billions of dollars across every city across the United States to help shore up their budgets? Wasn't it pretty historic that almost every city and state was able to bring their budgets to even due to?
This is something different. He allocated recently from like executive funding after pressure from all these asylum seekers showing up, which by the way are smartly being shipped by Greg Abbott to the cities that asked for these people, that said that they were welcome. He allocated $1 billion from his executive funds, the funds that he could actually move around, for all the.
Dylan could be swimming in Russian money with how much you could get with it after worthless it is, and live Scrooge McDuck swimming in the money pit dream. I do want a money pit. I do want a money pit eventually. It doesn't need to be real money. I just like the aesthetic of the money pit.
Cities, even though New York City alone is spending up to $5 billion per year on these people.
How much money did Trump allocate to the cities?
We didn't have all these people flooding the border during the Trump administration.
All right. Well, yeah, because
we had a genius policy called Remain in Mexico.
For the last year, we had a genius policy called COVID-19. Okay, I'm pretty sure that was curbing immigration more than anything else.
And that was used as a mechanism to block people from entering over the border.
Kind of sounds
That's
a little
also
bit
a good policy.
Sounds a little bit like a Great Reset policy there, but
to block people from entering the border.
To use COVID-19 as a means to enact new policy.
Well, this was the policy before. But
if you think that adding new regulations are bad, I'm curious. One of Trump's hailing achievements was, you brought it up, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Do you recognize that this policy is basically just like NAFTA plus with a whole bunch of new regulations relating to labor restrictions, green energy, stuff like that?
Yeah, there are, of course there are regulations and in a trade agreement, for sure.
Okay. You acknowledge that the tariffs that Trump put on China were one of the largest tax increases that Americans have seen. It amounted to some $76 billion of tax paid by Americans across the United States.
There is a cost to taking on a global threat, and like sometimes you have to use economic.
Well, what did we get out of the steel tariffs? What did China lose and what did we get? Like, it hurt China's economy, it hurt our economy, but how did it help Americans? It hurt American manufacturers. It wasn't just steel, it was in aluminum too. I know it hurt any company that had to work with steel. I know it hurt construction companies. I know it hurt a lot of manufacturing companies. Anyone that had to make aluminum cans, like anyone who like canned soup, for example, they were hurt as well. How did it help counter a bad thing that China's doing outside of, just kind of outside of it just being vague, kind of milquetoast, isolationist protectionism?
Economic policy as a backstop for national security policy. So yes, there are costs to things like tariffs. Like the economic voodoo that people promise, like from all different administrations, that you're gonna do a tariff over here and that's gonna protect you over here and save your job, that's nonsense. But there is a legitimate national security reason why you want to weaken China.
That's not why he did the steel tariffs. That's not why he did the aluminum tariffs. The reasons he did the steel and aluminum tariffs was because he wanted to help American steel producers and American aluminum producers. And it did help them a little bit, but it ended up costing Americans more and hurting anybody who was reliant on those industries down the line. And so I don't think it was a successful policy. And if it was meant to contain China or hurt China in what way, what did that achieve? What did it get? What did it get us when it comes to the Chinese?
Well, there's a national security reason. Don't you think that the approach that President Biden took with the CHIPS Act in terms of encouraging billions of dollars of domestic investment into semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S. is a better step than just slapping tariffs on China?
No, because a lot of these semiconductors were already going to be produced in the United States. They were already setting up for that.
Is he really against the CHIPS Act? Now that right there, that's virtue signaling anti-Biden. I don't think I've met a single person in this country. Well, I'm in Ukraine. That doesn't. Okay, not in this country. I haven't met a single person in the United States that I've talked to when I talk about the CHIPS Act who's like, yeah, no, I don't like investing in American microchip manufacturing. That sounds like a bad thing to do. I don't want my tax dollars being spent on that. The only people I could imagine that would say that would be the most hardcore of hardcore libertarians. Maybe I should ask the people when I go to LibertyCon. But point is, though, like, what really? Is he against the CHIPS Act? He's not going to give him credit for the CHIPS Act?
A lot of these semiconductors were already going to be produced in the United States. There
was going to be semiconductor production in the United States, yes, but the funds that he made available for semiconductor production is going to speed up that production faster. And that is not only a national security priority, that's a massive economic priority considering how much of our economy is reliant on microchips.
Already setting up for that.
I mean, if China does end up pulling the trigger and invading Taiwan, that's 50% of the global microchip market smashed. And where we get a very, very, very large percentage of our microchips from. There was a national security reason to speed up the production and an economic reason to do it. Plus, who doesn't like some good production jobs? I don't like the idea of kind of like chasing the dragon when it comes to production, replacing our service economy, as many people are. But there are certain industries that it is a priority to make sure we have short supply lines with.
Literally, we're not.
It was a giant subsidy to these companies that were already going to do this in the first place.
Okay, I mean, the audience, that's just wrong. There were major companies that made huge announcements. No, I don't think that semiconductor manufacturing is moving to the United States.
It was ramping up in the United States. We had a giant chip shortage due to COVID-19. Of course it was. Like this was already happening. You think with the global demand for semiconductors, like nobody was moving to produce them outside of China?
Or Taiwan. No, it wasn't economically feasible to do so. That was the whole issue. That was the whole reason why we needed the CHIPS Act, was to get that initial investment to jumpstart the production in the United States. It wasn't happening in the United States.
Again, it was starting to come back to the United States, and that had to do with the fact that we had freezes in production in China due to COVID-19. So yeah, there was an economic impact of that. And then after that, the Biden administration decided we're going to throw some corporate welfare at these companies that are already building these facilities over here.
Okay, I mean, it just didn't happen, but I don't know what else to say. I mean, you can look up like companies, investment, USA, CHIPS Act, and see that these factories and these companies started to invest.
Yeah, I mean, they took the money for sure.
Well, they needed the money because there's a high barrier of entry to some of the most sophisticated and state-of-the-art production that's existed in anything across the entire world. Yeah, of course they needed the Head Start money. Yeah.
Nonsense.
Well, fuck. What other areas do we think Trump is better than? I'll give Trump one thing. I think he tweets better than Biden. I'll give him that. I'll give a point to Trump in that category.
I mean, he even invented his own social media company. That's how productive of a president he is.
True.
Truth Social, though, could have thought of a better name. I mean, Truth Social, a little too on the nose, isn't it?
Everybody in here is on, including me. I totally have an account there.
What do you got for us?
Yeah, what do you got for us, James?
Thanks to the Destiny subreddit, which gave us these prompts.
that feels a little slightly biased, but whatever. Destiny should take the W.
Who is better on foreign policy, particularly with regard to the current conflict in the Middle East? Who has had a better record in the Middle East in the past?
They already kind of talked about this.
Oh, obviously the Trump administration would be better on foreign policy in the Middle East. Like, again, he was working to align our allies who had...
They take a drop of our blood, we'll take gallons of theirs. I mean, we will strike the families of terrorists. Massive increase in drone strikes. Massive increase in drone strikes. What did it resolve? What did he achieve? The only thing I'll give Trump on the Middle East is that he carried through Operation Inherent Resolve. He then abandoned the SDF, and it kind of undermined much of the efforts of Operation Inherent Resolve to combat ISIS and the SDF's ability to combat ISIS. But he did that. Outside of that, like the Abraham Accords were nice, but the idea that they were bringing peace to the Middle East, which is often how it was advertised, it was like a peace deal that he had negotiated all these peace deals. Nah. I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. I also don't like the deal he made with Morocco to withdraw our recognition of the people of Western Sahara to have a state, which was already decided by the UN and we voted in favor of, but then we compromised on in order for them to open relations with Israel. I don't like that at all. I don't like that compromise on, if we're trying to stand up for the quote unquote international rules-based order, I don't like compromising on it anytime it's convenient. But I mean, besides that, what did Trump achieve in the Middle East? Like, I would say the one achievement that I know for sure that he got was finishing Operation Inherent Resolve, but that was started by the Obama administration, so you can't even give all the credit to him. Besides that, I can't really give him much anything else. He just continued to funnel weapons into the war in Yemen, which saw no resolution under his term, and now we're seeing start to wind down with negotiations between the Houthis and the Saudis during the Biden administration, somewhat facilitated by the Biden administration, somewhat facilitated by the Chinese. The facilitated by the Chinese is Iranian and Saudi relations. I don't know what else we could really give him credit for.
Issues with non-recognition of each other against the common foe that is Iran. By contrast, you have the Biden administration having up to 3 potential spies on the team negotiating a nuclear deal with the Iranians. So, like, people who work for the Iranians, including Bob Malley, who had to have his security clearance pulled, that's the people he has advocating for us, literal agents of foreign powers.
Trump pulled out of the Iran deal, and I know that he doesn't like the Iran deal, but Trump pulled out of the Iran deal with no plan on how to stop the Iranians from developing a nuclear weapon. And pulling out of the Iran deal with no plan on how to do that was terribly irresponsible and compromises the goal of trying to stop nuclear proliferation around the world.
Trump didn't improve any of our standing anywhere in the Middle East. He hurt.
So if Iran gets a nuke, I think that would probably undermine countering Iran, if that's your goal.
Our relationship with the Kurds by abandoning them. He hurt our relationship with Afghanistan by not including them in the Doha agreements when he had talks with the Taliban. He drew down our U.S. force in Afghanistan and evacuated all.
But Biden completed the withdrawal on the same timeline. Yeah, accelerated it.
Well, the problem about the time, he actually did delay the timeline slightly, but the problem was that the Taliban I don't know why, that's a pointless word. The Taliban told Biden that if he was to try to continue to extend the timeline, then they would treat the agreement that they had made as null and void, and they would resume hostilities, and there would be American troops fighting the Taliban again. And so the question would be, is Biden willing to stay years more in order to try to get a better deal on withdrawal? And Biden, somebody who's wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan since like what, mid-Obama presidency, was not interested in that.
Have it out by 9/11.
No, it was at the same timeline. Biden was essentially committed to it lest he risk more violence occurring in Afghanistan afterwards. Biden had no choice but to basically stick to the timeline that Trump put him on a collision course.
He had a choice.
No,
he could have left in the winter when it would have been easier and there would have been less fighting spirit. He decided that he wanted to leave in and around the anniversary of September 11th because
less fighting spirit. What does that mean? That the cold would stop ISIS bombings? I don't know what he means by that.
he liked that symbol.
No.
Making a foreign policy decision like
Nina, thank you for the raid of 22. We're going to be ending stream probably soon as we wrap up this debate, but I still appreciate the raid. Thank you.
Like that because you think it's like symbolically awesome is stupid. That's what the Biden administration did. He gave speeches expressly saying that he wanted to be out before the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. Do you deny that that happened?
He might have made those speeches, but the timeline was on the timeline agreed with the Taliban on the Doha agreements. The idea that you would wait for that timeline to extend would have been catastrophic because one of the parts of that agreement was that the Taliban wouldn't attack us as we were pulling out of Afghanistan. If you extend beyond that timeline, and then you do that with the singular base and with the some 2,000 troops that Donald Trump left because he withdrew like 90% of our military presence from Afghanistan, and he did it after having direct negotiations with the Taliban, completely excluding the Afghanistan army from even being a part of those talks. Yeah, Donald Trump in every way, size, shape, and form set the next president up for failure because he knew that he might not have had to deal with it.
This is a complete misnomer.
What part of what I just said was incorrect?
First of all, you bring up the number of troops as if we don't do this trick in American foreign policy, which is have people who are private contractors who are former soldiers supplementing our forces. Now,
hold on, wait, let me guess.
So we had people.
You're saying that when Trump drew the troops down from 13,000 to 2,000, that we brought in 10,000 private contractor people to work in the military?
We had American military personnel. I'm sorry, these private contractors that were working under the auspices of the military to fill the gap. This is.
No. That's not how military contracting in Afghanistan works. There is military contractors in Afghanistan, but they don't do like frontline combat. They're not on the front lines fighting like against the Taliban or holding the line back and holding the front line. That was the job of the ANA. That was the job of the Afghan National Army, and they failed to do that. Adding more contractors, whether they work in construction or they work in like security of specific diplomats or specific officials or businessmen, like they do help with security when it comes to protecting certain individual buildings in, probably in the Afghan capital or certain diplomats and stuff like that. But they're not going to be able to hold back the Taliban. That's not their job. That's not what they do, as far as I know, when it comes to military contractors in Afghanistan.
This is obvious. We've been doing.
At that point, it's not even, it's a blurry line. What's a military contractor and what's a mercenary? But at that point, you could just, if they were doing that, you could just call them mercenaries.
This since the start of the wars in the Middle East, because guess what? Those people don't get counted in statistics of American soldiers being killed. So yeah, we had tons of these contractors all across the Middle East.
Okay, I just want to give you one more chance on that. So you're telling me that Trump replaced all the U.S. troops?
I'm saying we had a significant contractors presence.
No, hold on. You're giving a general response to a specific question. My specific question was, because it wasn't a general drawdown of troops, Donald Trump specifically drew down our military presence in Afghanistan.
Yes, it was on a withdrawal timeline that Biden also wanted to continue.
No, it wasn't on a withdrawal. It was on a withdrawal timeline that he negotiated with the Taliban.
Yes, there was a withdrawal timeline. People wanted to leave Afghanistan. This is true.
But he didn't. He didn't include the Afghanistani army in those talks at all.
Nina
Why?
Because the Afghanistani army is.
Big support. King, stay safe.
Thank you. I won't stay safe, but I'll stay alive. Hopefully, that's at least the plan. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is useless.
Part of the reason why they were useless is because they were completely cut out of any of the negotiations.
Oh, and thanks for the raid. I appreciate it.
Part of the reason why they were useless is, have you seen those people? It's full of addicts. Have you seen them do jumping jacks? They were never going to be a fit fighting force. Anybody can look up the videos. It's not a joke.
Aren't those videos of people doing jumping jacks? Weren't those literally the oncoming Taliban fighters?
No,
wasn't it them going into the gyms and doing like the crazy?
This was the Afghani fighting force. But part of the problem with the Afghanis is that their military could not function.
Afghan.
A Kurd is a Kurd.
Afghans, by the way.
Online 37 got a tier 3 subscription.
Hey.
Hey, Dylan, been playing any games lately? I've been playing Armored Core 6.
Not really.
I have to make a mech for stream. The Dylaninator.
Dylaninator. Thank you for my Thank you for making weapons designed after me. I appreciate it. I'm truly, I'll be sponsored by Raytheon before I know it. I appreciate the tier 3. You know, I haven't been playing many video games. I don't find the time to play video games really anymore. The only game I've been playing recently was Baldur's Gate, and yeah, I enjoy that. I wish I had more time to play video games. I wish I had more time to get lost in video games like I used to do when I was younger. But it's just, you know, I'm either writing scripts, I'm either streaming, preparing for stream, getting ready to film out in Ukraine. I think it'll be easier when I go back to the United States and I have more free time and I don't have to worry about, you know, filming in the war zone. Even though I'll still have editing, stuff like that, I'd probably be able to play some more video games. I don't know how much more, but I'll probably be able to play some new video games. I know that there's a new GTA coming out. I know that they finally announced that they're going to like have a trailer release soon. But yeah, I don't get to play many video games.
Function without the support of American these American contractors or military service personnel in order to operate certain equipment, identify targets, and all that. They're essentially a force that needs to be supplemented by us. And the Biden administration not only withdrew the final round of troops, but he was also aggressively pulling back these intelligence personnel. I knew people that were in Afghanistan working in these intelligence roles. They signed years-long contracts because they were expected to continue beyond the Trump withdrawal, but they were yanked out of the field by the Biden administration.
Okay, I mean, it's a fantastic claim that Donald Trump was replacing all of the troops being drawn out with
We
private.
already had these people there.
No, we just didn't. You're just wrong.
You're telling me we didn't have private military contractors
We did not have private. No, that's not how private military contractors work. They don't replace a sitting army that's working to do large-scale combat operations in the country.
Have them there.
That's not how PMCs work.
We have them there in.
Depends on the PMC. Like, that's how Wagner works. But that's how they worked in Central Africa until they had to pull back due to staffing shortages, due to them all dying altogether in Ukraine. But most PMCs, or at least American PMCs, do not operate that way. I mean, most people would say that how the PMCs operate in Ukraine are clearly as mercenaries. I mean, again, it's a blurry line, but the PMCs in Afghanistan were not doing frontline patrols, as far as I'm aware.
Supplement to our military.
Our military force was drawn down to somewhat 1,500
at certain
soldiers.
points, we actually end up having more of these contractors than actual registered American military service personnel.
Even you don't believe this. This is
100% true.
Even you don't believe this. This is
100% true. What are you talking about?
You don't believe this.
At points in
you think that at any point in fighting in any Middle Eastern war, we have more private military troops on the ground than actual U.S. military troops fighting the war.
100%.
Not like people that are doing construction, not people that are cooking in kitchens.
Yes.
Okay.
Like this has happened. This is the way that we supplement our military.
Supplement. Hold on. Don't say supplement. Now you're saying supplement. But before you're telling me these are our main fighting force. The main fighting force of the U.S. armies in the Middle East are private military contractors.
This is the way that we supplement our military forces.
Because you know you don't believe what you're saying.
Again, you're not letting me finish because you know I'm correct.
No,
this is the way we supplement our military forces in the Middle East. We use private contractors. Sometimes they actually exceed the amount of military personnel that are there. And part of the reason why politicians are so quick to do this is not because they're cheaper, which is what your senators will tell you, but it's because we don't count these people in our soldiers' deaths, even though they've been in the U.S. military their whole lives and they just happen to get a job with this. But yes, there are different points in the Iraqi conflict and the Afghanistan conflict where we had more of these military intelligence that work for private companies than actual U.S. military service personnel. That is an absolute fact.
Okay. I encourage the audience to look that up if you want. If you thought during the surge in Iraq, during any major occupation that our major fighting forces, PMCs, then
I mean, you can read the book called The Modern Mercenary. You can learn about how this system developed and like why this is very politically advantageous. It's 100% fact. Now, by the way, most of the time, these are just people who were in the military. So like, it is close enough to the approximate to our soldiers. So when you hear about American personnel dying over there, those are our troops. They just happen to be working for this company that's being contracted out.
Hold on. When stories like this come out, usually it's like BlackRock contractors killed in.
It would be Blackwater. I don't know. BlackRock. You know, they're buying all our real.
BlackRock owns everything, so maybe they own private military contractors.
I mean, you just said they own like half the military, apparently.
Sure, apparently, all the private troops that are over there. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, they are over there. Do you want me to look up the American military private contractors that are over there?
That are fighting force? Yeah, go for it.
You want me to?
Yeah, I don't know what else, James. What other questions you got?
Okay, boys, can we wrap this up here? I think Destiny did pretty well here. I think the area that he was probably weakest in is when he said we're not building an alliance to counter Iran. I don't know if we're building an alliance to counter Iran, but we are moving around in the region and trying to get allies that will help us counter Iran. When I say alliance, that means, it makes it sound like, you know, Iraq's allied with Israel and Israel's aligned with isn't true. But it is true that we, in part of the reason that we have troops in northeastern Syria is almost certainly to counter the Iranians, which are using Syria as a moving ground for the weapons to get to Hezbollah. It's one of the motivations, not the only motivation, but one of the motivations. There's also an anti-ISIS motivation that we're there too. There's also a keeping our commitments to our partners motivation. There's multiple motivations, but that's one of them. Besides that moment, I think generally speaking, Destiny did pretty well in this debate.